may be lying in bed now, letting the soft hush of night settle across your chest, like an old robe of silence wrapped around your shoulders. The day behind you feels far away, as if it's dissolving into the mist of forgotten time. There is nothing to hold on to now, no thought to finish, no urgency left to carry. The sky outside, perhaps invisible behind the ceiling, is still turning, and something deeper, older, quieter, begins to stir beneath it, somewhere. In a temple, long lost to sand and rain, a symbol was carved, not for power, but for peace. It wasn't meant to be seen by many, just understood by few, and in the quiet corridors of mystical sects, truths were whispered, not in shouts, but in candlelight. Ideas not meant to convert, but to remind, to guide, to soften the edge between this life and what might lie just beyond it. Tonight, we wander slowly through those forgotten paths, tracing the rituals, philosophies, and signs left behind by ancient spiritual sects. From mountaintop chants to desert sigils, we drift through mystery, never needing to solve it, only to witness it. Let the hush of old knowledge settle in your breath as we begin. The veil of forgotten sects across the long spine of history. Not all paths were paved by power. Some were carved quietly, like trails in mist, by those who sought neither conquest nor acclaim, only closeness to the sacred. While empires burned brightly and loudly, these sects moved in the hush between epochs, where stillness was a kind of prayer. The world has always held those who turned inward, those who stepped away from kings and temples, and toward silence. Their names were often few, their followers fewer, and yet for a moment, a season, a century, they carried ideas that shimmered like distant stars, flickering just beyond the reach of recorded time. Among them were the Essenes, a contemplative sect believed to have lived in the desert cliffs near Qumran, above the Dead Sea, in the 1st century BCE. As the Roman world expanded and tension grew within Judea, the Essenes walked away, not in rebellion, but in withdrawal. They formed their own communities apart from city life, away from the corruption they saw in the priestly elites of Jerusalem. They bathed daily, ate in silence, and devoted themselves to scripture and purity. Some scholars believe they may have been the keepers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, fragments of ancient text found sealed in jars, resting in desert caves for over 2,000 years. Words once read by candlelight now whispered across centuries, like a breath that never fully leaves the room. Further east, along the Ganges basin of ancient India, the Ajivikas traced a stranger, more austere path. Once rivals to the Buddhists and Jains, the Ajivikas believed in niyati, an unshakable destiny. To them, all events were predestined. No action, however righteous or cruel, could alter the path of a soul. They lived in simplicity, often wandering naked, rejecting both caste and control. Their belief in fate was absolute, and their discipline unwavering. While the world remembers the teachings of Buddha and Mahavira, the Ajivikas dissolved quietly into time. Their name now more often found in footnotes than stories. And yet, once, they were hundreds of thousands, a current in the great spiritual river of the subcontinent, in the foothills of ancient Armenia. A lesser-known movement called the Paulicians formed in the 7th century. Their teachings echoed early Christianity, but rejected the institutional power of the church. They saw the material world as flawed, even evil, and looked instead toward a purer spiritual truth. To outsiders, they were heretics. To themselves, they were keepers of a simpler light. The Byzantine Empire persecuted them for centuries, and yet, scattered like seeds on the wind, their beliefs survived, reshaped, renamed, folded into other traditions. Sometimes, the only legacy a sect leaves is the silence where its fire once warmed the night. Then, in the deserts of North Africa, the Donatists emerged, a Christian sect, born in the 4th century. They believed that only morally pure leaders could truly administer the sacraments. Their refusal to accept what they saw as corrupt clergy caused deep rifts within early Christianity. For them, righteousness was not a concept. It was a demand, but over time, political shifts and theological dominance eroded their presence. Theirs was a firm voice, eventually overtaken by the louder songs of empire. Still, in the quiet reading of their ideas, a kind of integrity lingers in China. During the early centuries of the Common Era, Way of the Celestial Masters took root. This Taoist movement combined ritual, astrology, and communal living into a cosmic harmony. Their sect did not seek revolution, but reordering, not through force, but through alignment with the Tao. They believed that illness and misfortune came from moral imbalance, and healing could come through confession and celestial favor. Their leaders, called celestial masters, were not conquerors, but guides. Even now, echoes of their thought ripple through modern Taoist practices, soft reminders of an older rhythm. These sects, and so many more, existed in the folds of civilization, not at its forefront, in small gatherings, in mountain caves, in the back rooms of homes lit by oil lamps. They passed on symbols and stories. Some sang their prayers. Some spoke only in numbers or symbols. Others said nothing at all, believing silence to be the clearest sound the soul could make. Often, these movements rose in response to corruption or conquest. Not as resistance in the political sense, but as a turning inward. They believed that truth was stillness, that the divine could not be forced, only approached with humility and time. The world rarely writes books about the quiet ones, but they exist, not as myths, but as real spiritual families, whose ideas flickered once, then faded gently. From the Therapeutae in Alexandria, ascetic Jewish philosophers who lived in deep seclusion, to the Bogomils of the Balkans, whose dualist vision of the world challenged both church and state. There are layers upon layers of spiritual yearning that once moved people to leave cities, traditions, and names behind. Not every sect left behind scriptures. Some marked their belief in the way they buried their dead, in the shape of a ritual tool, in the refusal to speak certain words, or in the pattern of stones they arranged in the soil. And so, when we speak of forgotten sects, we are not only remembering lost doctrines or vanished chants. We are remembering the human choice to seek the sacred outside of power, to step away, not to escape, but to return. Inward, downward, softly. You begin to feel how many thousands once knelt where no temple stood, how many eyes closed in the dark, not out of fear, but reverence. They did not seek followers. They sought a stillness that perhaps only they could name. That is the mystery. They leave us with a question that doesn't need answering, only listening, only resting. Only remembering. Essenes, silent keepers of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea holds a quiet that feels older than language. Salt crusts the shore in pale ribbons. The wind moves with weight, not speed. And somewhere between water and rock, the presence of something sacred lingers, not seen, not heard, only felt. It was here, in the ridged cliffs above this ancient basin, that a small Jewish sect lived in retreat. The Essenes, a people who chose stillness over speech, discipline over debate, purity over power. They emerge in the margins of history, mentioned briefly by writers like Josephus, Philo, and Pliny the Elder. Yet their own voices come not in books, but in fragments, scrolls sealed in clay jars, tucked into desert caves, and left to sleep beneath sand and silence for over 2,000 years. The story of the Essenes is not one of conquest or conversion. They did not seek to lead. They sought to wait, to prepare for the world that would come after this one had fallen. Sometime around the 2nd century BCE, as tensions grew in Judea, under the weight of Roman occupation and internal divisions, the Essenes withdrew. They moved away from Jerusalem, away from the temple priesthood they believed had become impure, and into the wilderness near Qumran, a sparse plateau above the Dead Sea. There, they formed a community unlike any other. Daily life in Qumran was structured with precision. The Essenes rose before dawn, washed in ritual baths, and gathered in silence to eat simple meals of bread, dates, and herbs. Their diet was plain, their speech even plainer. They shared everything, no private wealth, no personal gain. Members gave up their possessions and entered a long period of testing. Only after years of proving their devotion could they join the inner circle. They lived as if the world was ending, not in fear, but in readiness. Central to their belief was the coming of a divine figure known as the teacher of righteousness, a guide, a purifier, someone they believed would lead the faithful into a renewed covenant with God. But first, the world would be cleansed. The forces of darkness, the sons of Belial, would fall, and only the pure, those who had prepared, would remain. This worldview shaped everything they did. Their scrolls speak of two paths, the way of light and the way of darkness, the sons of truth and the sons of deceit. To the Essenes, this was not symbolic, it was real. Each day, each action, each thought, pulled a soul closer to one or the other. That's why their rules were so exact. They wrote detailed instructions for conduct, punishment, and ritual, not as control, but as alignment. To live rightly was to be clean. To be clean was to be ready. They bathed not to soothe the body, but to reset the soul. The mikveh, a ritual bath carved into the rocky ground, became the sacred heartbeat of their settlement. Men descended in silence, immersed fully, and emerged with their garments clinging to skin, cool, cleansed, consecrated. These acts were daily, constant, not symbolic, not optional. The Essenes believed in prophecy, but not the prophecy of dramatic visions or loud revelations. Theirs was quieter, a slow unfolding of divine truth. They studied scripture with fervent care, seeing patterns, signs, hidden meanings. They believed the Hebrew Bible held secrets, and that only the pure in spirit could unlock them in their eyes. The temple in Jerusalem had become corrupted, overtaken by politics and impure priests. So, they became the temple, their community, their discipline, all made sacred. They referred to themselves as the sons of light, and their leader, perhaps the teacher of righteousness, himself as a priest chosen by God. Some scholars believe he was a real figure, persecuted by rival factions in Jerusalem. Others see him as a spiritual archetype. Either way, his teachings shaped the community's laws, hymns, and hopes. And yet, the most enduring echo of the Essenes did not come through conquest or even memory. It came through clay, Between 1947 and 1956, in caves above Qumran, Bedouin shepherds and archaeologists uncovered a vast collection of ancient manuscripts, now known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Over 900 texts, biblical passages, hymns, sectarian rules, apocalyptic visions. Some were known versions of Hebrew scripture. Others were entirely new, unknown outside those caves. The scrolls were written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Some on parchment, others on papyrus, wrapped tightly, sealed in jars, and placed into darkness by hands that knew what they carried might not be safe in the light. These scrolls offer a glimpse into the mind of the Essene world, its hopes, its fears, its purity codes, and its belief that history was a sacred pattern, not a random stream. There is no official record of what happened to the Essenes. By the time the Romans crushed the Jewish revolt and destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Essenes were already fading. Qumran was abandoned, its walls cracked, its baths filled with dust, but their silence remained. Some believe remnants of their ideas may have influenced early Christianity, particularly among ascetic communities who also awaited divine transformation. Others point to similarities between John the Baptist and Essene ritual, though nothing is certain. What is known is this: the Essenes lived as if they were already in the presence of what they awaited. Their purity was not performative. Their rituals were not for spectacle. They were preparations, inner alignments, steps toward a future they might never see, but still believed would come. You begin to sense what it must have felt like to wake before the sun, to descend into stone waters, to read ancient texts by oil lamp, to live with the constant awareness that every act, every breath, every silence was being weighed by time. The world around them chased power. They chased light, and when that light did not arrive, they left behind scrolls, not sermons, not victories, just words. Waiting in jars, waiting in caves, waiting for someone to find them. Tonight, their silence still speaks softly, like something ancient exhaling through stone. Therapeutae, monks of stillness by the Nile, along the shores of the Nile. Just outside ancient Alexandria, there once lived a community who chose a different kind of life. Not priests in robes, not rulers or scribes, but seekers, quiet, distant, untroubled by the pace of the world below. They were called the Therapeutae. Their name means healers, not of the body alone, but of the soul. They believed healing was not found in medicine or ritual sacrifice, but in simplicity, in silence, in sacred time. No one knows exactly when they formed, but by the 1st century CE, the Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria described them in a quiet text called On the Contemplative Life, not as visionaries or prophets, but as people who lived with deliberate stillness. They settled across the lake from Alexandria, in the hills beyond the city's noise. The land here was calm, open, fertile, but uncrowded. From their stone dwellings, they could look out across the Nile Valley, watch the river rise and fall, feel the sun move across unhurried days. They lived alone, but not in isolation. Each had their own dwelling, a simple cell with no ornament, no distraction, just a mat, a lamp, and sacred texts. They ate little, often bread, water, and herbs, and only after the sun set. 6 days a week were given to solitude, to meditation, reflection, and the study of scripture. Their writings blended Jewish teachings with Hellenistic philosophy. The Psalms were read alongside Greek hymns. the book of Exodus, besides Stoic writings on virtue. It wasn't about choosing between cultures. It was about refining the soul through truth, wherever it could be found. And then came the seventh day. On this day, they gathered, men and women, together, though they lived separately the rest of the week. They did not meet in temples or formal halls. They met outdoors, under open skies, where stars replaced icons, and wind carried the echoes of their chants. The centerpiece of their gatherings was music, not performance, but offering. They sang in unison, psalms, hymns, prayers, not to stir emotion, but to center it, to align the voice with breath, to align the breath with silence. Their songs rose slowly, evenly. Philo wrote that they sang not confusedly or disorderly, but in harmony, as if moved by a single soul. You imagine it now, voices rising from the hillside like mist. No instruments, no sermon, only steady tones, woven like thread, fading gently into wind. This was their temple, stillness, sound, sky. Unlike other ascetic groups of the time, the Therapeutae were not focused on punishment. They did not seek to break the body, to elevate the spirit. They sought balance, a gentle discipline that invited peace rather than demanded it. They believed the soul was a garden, not to be burned or abandoned, but cultivated through fasting, through prayer, through sacred study. Their days were marked by rhythm: wake, read, reflect, fast, sing, sleep, and repeat. They didn't shun the world in anger. They withdrew from it in reverence. Some say they were inspired by the Essenes, or shared roots with similar Jewish sects. Others suggest Platonic ideals shaped their philosophy, the belief that truth was not found in the material, but in the eternal. But the Therapeutae never argued for dominance. They did not write polemics or demand allegiance. They simply lived, and in that living, they bore witness to another way. Philo admired them deeply. He saw in their life a kind of purity, untouched by the corruption of politics or pride, a way of being that placed the soul before the self. Women held equal place in the community. This was rare in ancient spiritual orders. They sang, they read, they reflected. They were not veiled, not silent, not secondary. Each was seen as a soul, whole, sovereign, sacred. When night came, their dwellings remained dark. No lamps were lit for comfort. Instead, they let the dark be the teacher. To sit without light was not to fear the unknown, it was to recognize it, to understand that what can't be seen still exists, still speaks, still matters. You begin to feel the rhythm of their days, not hurried, not heavy, but shaped by a different kind of time, where each moment bends toward stillness, not achievement. They believed the divine could not be summoned, only received, and to receive, one must be ready, empty, listening, clean of noise. This is why they fasted, not to suffer, but to make space, why they chanted, not to be heard, but to become, hollow enough for the sacred to fill. Why they studied, not to master texts, but to be mastered by them. Their healing was not loud. It was not immediate. It was gradual, like water softening stone, like wind reshaping hillsides, like a soul refining itself across lifetimes of attention. Over time, their community faded. There are no ruins left to visit, no official records of their decline, only Philo's quiet words, and the echo of a lifestyle once lived beside a river. Some say early Christian monasticism may have drawn from their ways, from their structure, their solitude, their devotion. But the Therapeutae did not seek to create legacy, only stillness, and in doing so, they became part of something larger, a rhythm that lives on in those who step outside the world's noise and sit quietly in the center of their own breath, there by the Nile. In a world without clocks, a small group of souls once lived not to be known, but to know, to be shaped by silence, and to offer it back. You imagine what it would feel like now, to walk those hills at dusk, to hear faint voices carried by wind, to know nothing more is required of you than to sit still and listen. Ajivikas, souls drifting on fate's river in the dusty corridors of early Indian thought. A path once wound its way quietly beside the better-known roads of Jainism and Buddhism. This was the path of the Ajivikas, a sect long forgotten by most, yet once woven deep into the spiritual fabric of the subcontinent. They left behind no grand temples, no lineage of monks that lasted through the ages, but for a time, they walked alongside kings and hermits, scholars and beggars, not as rivals, but as wanderers in a universe they believed to be entirely fixed. For the Ajivikas, free will was an illusion. They believed that every breath, every blink, every step a soul takes is already written, not by gods, not by karma, but by a force called niyati, absolute, mechanical fate. They taught that the soul passes through a chain of lives, not because of choice, not because of merit or sin, but because that is what was always going to happen. It was not meant to comfort, nor to punish, only to reveal. This belief set them apart in a time when most spiritual schools insisted on personal responsibility. Buddhists spoke of the Eightfold Path, Jains of careful ethical conduct. Both emphasized liberation through discipline, but the Ajivikas saw all of that as dust stirred by the wind. No act could change what was written. No prayer could bend the river dot, and yet they practiced some of the most intense asceticism of the ancient world. They stood still for hours under the burning sun. They fasted, walked unclothed through forests, slept on bare earth. Not to purify karma, they rejected karma. Not to reach enlightenment, they believed it would come in time. Whether earned or not, they endured, because it, too, was part of the unfolding. You begin to feel their paradox. They let go of control, yet lived with enormous discipline. They rejected choice, yet chose a path of austerity. They believed nothing could be changed, yet gave everything to spiritual life. Their founder, Makaligos, is said to have lived around the 6th century BCE, a contemporary of the Buddha and Mahavira. His life is shrouded in fragments and contradictions. Some stories say he was born in poverty, the son of a humble cloth painter. Others tell of him traveling with Mahavira before their paths divided, their philosophies splitting like a river branching toward separate seas. The Buddha, in later texts, speaks of Gosala as a misguided teacher, one who proclaims that purity comes not by effort, not by vows, not by practices, but only through fate. Yet Gosala had followers, many, and for centuries, the Ajivikas flourished. They were especially favored in southern India during the time of the Mauryan Empire. Emperor Binjusara, father of Ashoka, is said to have followed their teachings. So too, perhaps, did others in the royal court, in caves near modern-day Tamil Nadu. Stone inscriptions still whisper of Ajivika monks, carvings older than most, surviving Jain or Buddhist relics. They lived on the edges of power, but spoke of power as meaningless. For them, even kings were carried by the current. Even gods were bound by the chain of lifetimes. Even time was a circle, not a line. Ajivika doctrine taught that every soul would pass through 8.4 million forms of existence. It did not matter what the soul did, the sequence was set. Every birth, every species, every joy and sorrow, predetermined. There would be human lives, animal lives, lives of light, lives of darkness, until the cycle, naturally, exhausted itself. And then, liberation. Not won, not deserved, only reached on this. The Ajivikas offered a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of mastery, but of surrender, where other faiths asked you to act, to shape your destiny, to avoid wrong and do right. The Ajivikas asked something else, to accept, to let the river carry you, to live as one already floating. You imagine the stillness of that worldview. The pressure lifted, the striving released, the way your thoughts might change if you believed that every moment was exactly as it must be, not in reward or punishment, but in perfect unfolding. And yet, this surrender was not passivity. The Ajivikas were strict, disciplined. They fasted for days, held silence, practiced non-possession. They did not believe these acts would change their fate, but they believed this was how fate was being lived through them, a kind of sacred performance where the soul plays its role. Moment by moment, even when the ending is already written, they revered no creator gods. They had no elaborate cosmology of heavens and hells. Instead, they focused on time, on the slow, grinding wheel of lifetimes. And in that time, symbols held strange power. They carried no talismans. They made no offerings. But to them, the body itself became the shrine. Its suffering, its stillness, its breath, all were part of the script. In Ajivika thought, there was no need to fight fate, only to witness it, and that witnessing, in its way, became sacred. You begin to feel how radical this was, in a world full of rules, rituals, and reformers. The Ajivikas stepped back. They said, all of it is happening exactly as it must. Even this argument, even this withdrawal to live, was to drift, and to drift, consciously, was their quiet rebellion. In time, their numbers dwindled. Buddhism and Jainism grew. No empires rose. New teachings caught the hearts of kings, and slowly, the Ajivikas disappeared, not with violence, not with collapse, but like fog lifting from a riverbank. Their teachings left little behind, few scriptures, no lasting schools, but their silence echoes still, in the idea that not all surrender is defeat, that there is strength in knowing nothing must be controlled. You picture one now, an Ajivika monk standing in the wind, bare feet on stone, eyes half closed, not asking for insight, not seeking visions, only living the moment, as it already was. In the stillness of that gaze, you begin to wonder what it would feel like, to release every should, every if, every when. To stop rowing, and let the river carry you. Meant baptism beneath the stars. The water is not still, not here. It flows, slowly, but with weight, ancient and knowing, just as it always has along the banks of the Euphrates. And there, in the shallow currents, a quiet people gather, white-robed, riverborn, and deeply bound to one another. They are the Mandaeans, one of the last surviving Gnostic faiths still breathing in the world today. Their story winds back over 2,000 years, older than most churches, older than most sects. And yet, they remain scattered now, across borders and lands, but always oriented toward water, because for the Mandaeans, water isn't just cleansing. It isn't symbol or metaphor. It is alive. To touch it is to remember. To enter it is to return. They call it yardna, not just any water, but flowing water, living water. It is through this current that souls are purified, not once in life, but again and again. Baptism as rhythm, not as threshold. Each week, the faithful wade in again, not as rebirth, but as remembrance. The Mandaean calendar is dotted with holy days, but every Sunday, without fail, the river calls, and each time, the ritual unfolds with tender precision. Clothed in white linen, the priest lifts his hands toward the sky. He reads from ancient scrolls, written in a language that few outside the faith understand. Mandaic, a tongue descended from Aramaic, filled with symbols that seem to hum with weight. Words are whispered, not into the air, but into the water itself, because the river remembers, and in that memory lives a deeper truth, one that the Mandaeans have carried quietly through wars, migrations, and centuries of exile. That truth is this: the world you see is not the only one. There is a higher realm, a world of light. It is from there that all souls come, and it is to there that all souls must return. But between the light and the earth lies a world of struggle, a shadowed place, filled with confusion, forgetfulness, and time. This is the place we live in now, and so the soul drifts, longing to return to the light, but caught in matter, born into bodies, subject to sorrow, tied to earth, but always looking upward to the Mandaeans. Baptism is the rope that binds the soul to its source. It is not a one-time rite, not a threshold of salvation, but a lifeline drawn again and again. So the soul does not forget. You begin to feel how gently this belief flows. Not urgent, not harsh, but steady. A slow reawakening, week by week, as the soul is washed in light and pointed once more toward its home. They speak of John the Baptist as their greatest prophet, but not in the way that Christians or Muslims do. To the Mandaeans, he is not a forerunner, not a witness to another. He is the central teacher, the one who understood water as more than symbol, who knew it as a bridge. And Jesus to them is something else entirely, not a savior, not divine, but a figure of the material world, misunderstood perhaps, or even a deceiver. These are sharp distinctions, ones that have placed the Mandaeans at odds with every major Abrahamic tradition around them. But they do not argue. They do not convert. They do not seek to convince. Their faith is lived quietly, in community, in ritual, in the steady return to the riverside. Even their houses of worship, called mandis, are modest, always built near flowing water, always open to the sky, because, above them, the stars, the Mandaeans, believe that each soul comes from the realm of light. But before descending into the world, it passes through constellations, and those stars, remember, they are not only bodies of fire, but watchers, souls that have returned and now shine from above. To be born is to fall, to die is to rise again, and in between, the soul is washed in water, in prayer, in the gentle witness of the stars. The scrolls of the Mandaeans speak of these things in veiled language. Books like the Ginza Rabbah, a sacred text preserved by hand for centuries. In it, myths unfold slowly, stories of creation, descent, and return, of beings of light sent to rescue fallen souls, of dark forces that bind the world in forgetfulness. And yet, these stories are never told with fire and thunder. There is, No threat of hell, no promise of glory, only the long, slow journey of the soul and the rituals that help it remember. You imagine now the soft voice of a priest, chanting beside the river. The pages in his hands are worn smooth. The script is delicate, almost geometric, an alphabet of curves and echoes. He dips a palm into the current, lets the water fall in silence, not washing, but awakening. Each drop, a word, each motion, a memory. This is not theater. It is not performance. It is the ancient act of anchoring the soul, so it does not drift too far from what it once knew. To the Mandaeans, purity is not a moral badge. It is a state of clarity, a nearness to light. And so, even as their numbers dwindle, even as they live in diaspora, far from the rivers they once knew, they carry water with them. In exile, a bucket becomes a river, a basin becomes yardna, because water, like memory, can flow anywhere. They continue the rites in homes, in corners of foreign cities, whispering the prayers in Mandaic, so the sound is not lost. You begin to sense their quiet strength, a strength, not in numbers or influence, but in preservation of identity, of sacred rhythm, of soul. For centuries they have resisted conversion, not by debate, but by devotion. They ask no one to join them. They simply continue, flowing forward. Like the rivers they revere, and in this, there is something deeply stilling. The world may rise and fall, nations may turn to dust, but somewhere, always, there is a white-robed figure, stepping into water beneath the stars. You picture that moment, feet submerged, hands open, the night sky watching, not as a ritual for others to see, but as a memory the soul carries forward, a soft murmur in the current, a prayer sent upward and heard, perhaps, by the stars that once were souls. The Cathars light within the Languedoc, the hills of southern France, hold more than stone. In the Languedoc, where wind smooths over olive groves and ruined fortresses, a whisper still lingers, soft as ash, light as breath. It is the memory of a people called the Cathars, a people who lived simply, spoke gently, and believed, above all, that this world was not their home. To them, matter was a trap, a veil over the light that lived within. Spirit was truth, and the body, a temporary shadow. Their faith did not begin in revolt. It was not built on rebellion, but on refusal. Refusal to lie, refusal to harm, refusal to take part in the world's corruption, a world they believed was ruled not by a loving creator, but by a lesser force. In Cathar belief, the cosmos is a struggle between two powers. On one side, the god of light, pure, formless, eternal. On the other, the prince of this world, a false god who made matter, who shaped flesh, who bound souls in the weight of bones. And so, to live in this world is to live in exile. You begin to sense how quietly that idea settles, not in anger, but in gentle sorrow. The Cathars did not worship in grandeur. They held no golden altars, no jeweled icons. Their churches were simple homes, their gatherings marked by peace and song. They had no priests, only perfects, men and women who lived in full renunciation, vowing to do no harm, own no property, eat no meat, and walk through life as vessels of light. The rest of the community supported them, and in return, the perfects offered guidance, prayer, and the consolamentum, a sacred rite of spiritual awakening, often given before death. There was no baptism by water, no holy war, no hierarchy, just the belief that each soul carried a divine spark, and that to free it, one must live gently. refusing to feed the illusions of the world. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the Cathar movement spread across the Languedoc, from Albi to Toulouse, from Béziers to Montségur. They grew not through conquest, but through quiet example. Even nobles began to listen. They offered refuge. They gave protection. They found in Catharism something unshaken by the corruption they saw in the Church of Rome. But light, when it grows, is often feared. The Catholic Church named them heretics, not for violence. The Cathars were peaceful, not for blasphemy. They quoted scripture with reverence, but because they questioned the authority of the visible world. To reject matter was to reject the Church's wealth, its sacraments, its power. And so came the Albigensian Crusade, not fought on distant shores, but within the heart of Europe. Pope Innocent III declared war upon them, and in 1209, armies marched south. They entered Béziers first. When asked how to distinguish heretics from the faithful, a papal commander is said to have answered, "Kill them all. God will know his own." Over 10,000 were slaughtered. From there, the crusade continued, burning towns, toppling strongholds, crushing a people who refused to fight back. The Cathars had no weapons, only words and faith. Some fled to the hills, to caves, to quiet places where they could still sing and pray. Others gathered at Montségur, a fortress in the Pyrenees, rising like a beacon above the valley. For years, they held it, not with blades, but with stillness. Inside, families lived with the perfects. They shared bread. They kept watch. They waited. But in 1244, the fortress fell. Over 200 Cathars were captured. They were offered one last chance to renounce their beliefs. None did. They were led to a field below, and there, burned alive. Even then, they did not scream. Witnesses said they walked into the flames singing, not out of defiance, but as souls returning home. The field where it happened is still known. The field of the burned dot. You imagine the silence there now. Wildflowers in place of fire, wind in place of cries, and somewhere beneath the soil, ashes that once whispered of light. Though the Cathars were destroyed, their vision endures. They left behind no temples, no cathedrals, no monuments, only fragments of texts. Hymns written in Occitan, a language of troubadours, of longing, and symbols carved in stone, crosses without crucifixion. No suffering body, only emptiness. 2. The Cathars. The cross was not about death, it was a reminder of spirit unbound, of the light that came before form, and would remain after it faded. They believed that Jesus was not a flesh and blood man, but a being of pure light, sent to show the path of release, and so they followed quietly, living as if they were already beyond the world. Their rules were not enforced with fear. There was no threat of damnation, only the question, how gently can a soul walk, knowing it does not belong here? You begin to feel the weight of that question, not as burden, but as a soft shifting in the heart. Their way was not built for power. It did not seek to change the world, only to see through it, and perhaps that is why it still echoes. Long after the fires died, long after the stones fell, the idea remains that light does not belong to this world, but it passes through it, quietly, sometimes in words, sometimes in silence, sometimes in those who are willing to lose everything, to remember where they came from, and somewhere in the hills of Languedoc, where the wind moves like breath across the ruins, you might still hear it, the hush of something once sacred, waiting not to rise again, but simply to be remembered. Yazidis, peacock angels and sacred mountains in the hills of northern Iraq, where stone paths rise toward silence. There is a valley few maps name with reverence, but here, the sacred is still alive. Mount Lalish, not just a mountain, but a sanctuary, a resting place for light. At its base, barefoot pilgrims tread soft earth, their steps deliberate, their voices hushed. This is the spiritual heart of the Yazidis, a people whose faith predates prophets, whose beliefs stretch further back than scripture. They speak of a beginning not marked by sin, but by divine trust. Their God, distant, perfect, beyond need, created 7 holy beings to care for the world. Chief among them, Mount Athos, the peacock angel. No horns, no fire, only pride, color, and radiance. Mount Athos refuses to bow to anyone but the Creator, not from rebellion, but from loyalty. In Yazidi tradition, God praises him for this, not punishes him, and entrusts him with the guidance of the world. You begin to notice the shift, how different this sounds from what you were taught. To most outsiders, Mount Athos has been misunderstood, mistaken for a fallen angel, branded heretical, even demonic. But the Yazidis do not fear these labels. Their truth is older than mistranslation, and stronger than exile. For centuries, they have guarded it, not with weapons, but with stories, symbols, and sacred silence. There are no written creeds. They're holy texts. The Kuls are sung from memory, passed down like breath. From elder to child, from mountain to village, and always. Beneath the songs, there is the sound of the peacock, a symbol not of vanity, but of beauty that refuses to hide. Feathers like flames, eyes on every plume, color, not chaos. To the Yazidis, Mount Athos is the bridge between heaven and earth. He reminds them, pride is not always sin, and obedience, not always virtue. What matters is intention. And so, their faith walks this line, between shadow and light, between reverence and resistance. They pray with hands open to the sky. They kiss the thresholds of shrines. They light olive oil lamps beside holy tombs, their flames flickering like ancient memory. Their calendar turns not on battles or empires, but on cycles of pilgrimage and celebration. Every year, in autumn, tens of thousands return to Lalish, draped in white, carrying offerings of food and light. They dance, they fast, they sing into the stars. No loud commands, no sermons, just presence. The earth here is not just ground, it is sacred body. The spring near the temple is said to have flowed since the world began, and the cave behind the shrine, a womb of rebirth, where the first man was formed. You begin to feel how deeply this place holds its past. Even the stones seem to listen. There is a reverence that doesn't need to explain itself. A sense that faith, when lived fully, doesn't need to argue. But still, the world has not been kind. The Yazidis have endured wave after wave of persecution, not because they harmed others, but because their beliefs could not be neatly named. During the Ottoman era, they were forced to convert or be killed. Later, under more modern regimes, they were accused of devil worship, denied rights, pushed from their land, and then, in recent memory, 2014, when the so-called Islamic State invaded the Sinjar region, they unleashed horror. Thousands of Yazidis were killed. Thousands more, mostly women and children, were captured, enslaved, trafficked, brutalized. The world watched. Some wept. Many forgot. But the Yazidis survived. They buried their dead. they mourned, and then they walked back to Lalish, back to the mountain that never turned them away. Here, they still gather, still sing, still name their children after peacocks, rivers, stars, because even after genocide, they know who they are, and that kind of knowing cannot be erased. Theirs is a religion of resilience. It was never designed to spread, only to remain, passed through the body, held in silence, anchored in place. A Yazidi cannot convert it, you must be born to it, like a seed planted in sacred soil. Their faith is woven with customs, some seemingly simple, yet deeply symbolic. They do not eat lettuce. They avoid wearing blue, a color reserved for divine beings. They do not utter the name of evil, believing that what you speak, you give power to, and they honor the peacock, not just as a symbol of Mount Athos, but as a reminder of the soul's radiance. You begin to see how this faith lives in everything, in gesture, in silence, in color. Even the temple at Lalish is built without nails, because in their cosmology, metal pierced the earth, and the earth still remembers. So they use stone, wood, and water, materials that heal, that honor. The shrines are marked with cone-shaped domes, rising like spires toward the stars. Inside, cloths are tied to sacred places, prayers left not in words, but in knots. No begging, just presence, just trust, because at the core of Yazidi belief is not fear, but balance. They believe the world is entrusted to human care, and Mount Athos, though powerful, does not intervene unless asked. So they live with humility, with patience, with the quiet knowledge that every step, every breath, every choice is sacred, and in that way, their faith becomes invisible architecture, not just a religion, but a rhythm, a way of walking in the world without needing to own it. You imagine them now, candles flickering in stone recesses, children learning hymns under the stars, an elder whispering a prayer into the mountain wind. There is no sermon here, no promise of salvation, only the echo of something vast that asks nothing but remembrance. Because to be Yazidi is to hold light in both hands, knowing the world may never understand it, and still to keep going. The songs do not need translation. They carry meaning in the way breath does, wordless but essential, like feathers that land softly and remain. Even when the bird has flown, Druze, echoes of the star-cloaked one in the soft green folds of Lebanon's Shof mountains. The wind carries a name that echoes quietly through cedar groves and stone villages. Al-Hakim, the star-cloaked one, a figure, hidden not by distance, but by design. Here the Druze people walk a path that does not seek attention. Their presence is subtle, not erased, but reserved. Their beliefs are not broadcast, but lived. Unlike most traditions, the Druze do not convert others. They do not build large temples. They do not seek to grow, only to continue. Their faith is both ancient and unfinished, a stream drawn from Islam, from Gnosticism, from Greek philosophy, from echoes older than any one book. And though it begins in the 11th century, in Fatimid Cairo, under a strange and powerful caliph, its roots grow much deeper. Al-Hakim, by Omar, Allah, ruler of the Fatimid Caliphate, was unlike other caliphs. He vanished one night in 1021. No body, no farewell, just a disappearance. Some called it death. The Druze called it ascension. To them, Al-Hakim never died. He became hidden, waiting for the right time to return. And from this belief, the Druze faith took shape, not through conquest, but through secrecy. They call themselves Al-Muwahhid, the believers in the oneness of all. To the Druze, God is not a figure to fear, but a truth to reflect. Their theology is stripped of excess. No pilgrimage, no fasting, no outward rituals. Their path is inward. Scripture is reserved for the initiated, a small circle known as the kukul, or the wise. They dress simply, live humbly, and hold the sacred texts behind closed doors, not to create a wall, but to protect what must not be diluted. Most Druze, the Jel, or uninitiated, live without reading these books. Yet they carry the faith in everyday life, through family, ethics, and quiet resilience. The Druze believe that truth reveals itself slowly, only to those prepared to carry it, and so, they do not preach. They do not write down what must be lived. They guard silence as a form of reverence. Their places of worship are small, unadorned, open only to the wise. You won't find idols or icons. Instead, you'll see simplicity, a kind of quiet that invites listening. And above it all, you'll see the five-colored Druze star. Each point glows with meaning. Green for the mind, AKL, the universal intellect. Red for the soul, Nafs, the strength of will. Yellow for the word, Kalima, the divine voice. Blue for precedent, Sab, the cause and effect. White for the future, Tali, the unfolding of all things. But these aren't just ideas. They are seen as cosmic principles, facets of creation, gates of knowledge, the breath behind existence, and surrounding them, the sixth element, unspoken, the mystery that binds them all. That mystery flows through their belief in reincarnation, not as escape, but as return. To the Druze, the soul is eternal. When the body dies, the soul moves on immediately. No waiting, no in-between. It is reborn in another body, carrying with it the weight of past actions, and the task of further learning. This cycle continues until the soul reaches unity, a return to the oneness it once knew. There is no final judgment day, no hell in flames, no heaven in clouds, just the long unfolding of self toward truth. Because of this, Druze often sense a familiarity between souls. Some say a child might recall a past name, a place they've never visited, a scar from a wound never suffered in this life. These whispers are not fantasies to them. They are clues, echoes of a longer journey. In their view, each lifetime is a step not toward reward, but toward integration, and so, morality becomes a matter of alignment, not obedience. To live well is not to avoid punishment, but to become more whole. And yet, the world around them has often misunderstood this quiet path. Throughout history, the Druze have been labeled heretics, targeted by empires, pressured to abandon their secrecy. But they did not bend. They retreated into mountains, held fast to their customs, and protected their inner flame. They developed a tightly bound community, marrying only within the faith, trusting few, remembering everything. Even now, their numbers are small, spread across Lebanon, Syria, and northern Israel, but their presence feels ancient, rooted in the hills, where olive trees twist beside stone homes. Druze elders gather under the stars, their hands wrapped in white cloth, their eyes reflecting stories not written in books. You imagine this now. A candle flickers beside an old volume no outsider will ever see. The air is still, and somewhere in the distance, a child stirs in their sleep, carrying the soul of someone who once sang beneath this same sky. To the Druze, time is not a line. It loops, it teaches, it listens. And though they do not invite you in, They do not push you away. They simply remain, quiet, guarded, enduring. Their teachings speak of 7 prophets through history, but also of sages who arrive when needed, not to lead armies, but to remind us, and above them all, the Hidden One watches, not from a throne, but from a place beyond time. Al-Hakim, the mystery wrapped in light, not feared, not explained, only remembered that as you drift through the folds of this mountain faith, you begin to sense that some truths are not meant to be spoken, only felt, like a breeze through the pines, like a name written in stars, the Bon Tibet's whisper before the Buddha high in the Himalayan plateau, where the winds sound like breath drawn straight from the sky. There was once a voice older than Buddhism, older than writing, older, even, than memory itself. This was Bon, the ancient spiritual tradition of Tibet, not a faded branch of Buddhism, but its own path, formed long before Siddhartha ever sat beneath the Bodhi tree. To walk through Bon is to step into a world where every stone holds a spirit, every cloud carries meaning, and death is not the end, but the beginning of another kind of listening. Bon teaches that the world is alive, not symbolically, but truly. Everything, rivers, wind, mountain, peaks, is conscious, and between these visible things move the spirits. Some are peaceful, some are not. Some linger near families, others haunt valleys or watch from heights. To live well in the Bon tradition is to live in balance with these forces, to recognize them, speak to them, feed them, and appease them, not out of superstition, but out of respect, not to command, but to harmonize. Before Buddhist monasteries rose from stone, Bon shamans, known as Ngagpa, chanted beneath open skies. They wore white robes or black cloaks. They danced with drums and trumpets made of human bone. They did not hide from death. They walked with it, because in Bon, death is not something to conquer. It is a passage, and the passage must be prepared. For with great care, one of the most known and most misunderstood Bon practices is the sky burial. When a person dies, their body is not sealed in the ground. It is offered to the sky. Monks or designated body breakers carry the corpse to a high plateau. There, beneath wide air and watchful vultures, the body is dismembered, mixed with barley flour and yak butter, and then left for the birds to the western eye. This may seem brutal, but to the Bon heart, it is an act of compassion. The body is only a vessel. Once the soul departs, the flesh is no longer needed, so why waste it? Instead, the body feeds the creatures of the sky, and the soul, no longer tethered, begins its journey. Because in Bon, the afterlife is not fixed. It is a dream state, one that mirrors how you lived, what you feared, and what you learned. This state is called the Bardo, a liminal realm between death and rebirth. It is not unique to Bon. Tibetan Buddhism later adopts this term, but here, it holds a roar shape in the Bardo. The soul encounters visions, some terrifying, some divine, but all of them are projections, reflections of one's inner state. The key is not to fight them, nor to flee, but to recognize their nature and let go. Some souls are reborn, others dissolve. Some linger, becoming spirits. Some ascend, and so the living prepare. Not by avoiding death, but by studying its steps, dreaming its signs, learning its rhythm. Rituals in Bon are not just for the dying, they are for the everyday. There is the wind horse ritual, a prayer carried not by speech, but by motion. Prayer flags, known as lungta, are strewn across mountain passes and rooftops, their colors fluttering in the wind. Each flag contains a symbol, a wish, a sacred syllable, and as the flag moves, the wind carries the prayer into the world. The Lungta is more than decoration. It is a spiritual current, a horse of wind, lifting fortune, calming spirits, restoring balance. To be in a Bon village is to hear these flags whispering at all hours. Even in silence, the wind is speaking. You may also see stones stacked into spirals or carved with ancient symbols. These are life wheels, representations of the soul's journey, looping through cycles of transformation. The spiral, to Bon, is sacred. It turns inward and outward. It reflects the nature of the cosmos, always moving, never ending. Their sacred texts are old. Some say as old as 18,000 years, though scholars debate this. The central scripture, the Zhangzheng Nyan Gud, traces its roots to a lost kingdom called Zhangzheng, a civilization said to predate the Tibetan Empire. The language of Zhangzheng is nearly forgotten now, but its essence lingers, not in books, but in chants passed from teacher to student, from voice to breath, from silence to memory. The Bon pantheon is rich. It includes deities, sky gods, earth spirits, and protectors. There is Tanpa Shenrab, the founder of Bon, said to have lived thousands of years before the Buddha. A being of luminous wisdom, he descended from a heavenly realm not to conquer, but to teach. His life mirrors the Buddha in some ways: noble birth, renunciation, spiritual awakening. But in Bon, his path unfolds through revelation, through interaction with gods and spirits, through rituals that bind heaven and earth. Even today, Bon practitioners do not forget. They preserve their chants. They wear sacred cords. They trace ancient sigils in barley flour. When Buddhism spread across Tibet in the 8th century, Bon was nearly extinguished. Its texts were burned, its shrines destroyed, its teachers exiled. But Bon did not vanish. Instead, it adapted. It in quieter forms, hidden within rural villages, passed through oral lineages. Later, it would blend with Buddhism, sharing rituals, language, and symbols. Some call this syncretism, others call it survival. Today, Bon is recognized once again as a valid spiritual path. There are Bon monasteries, Bon scholars, Bon festivals, and yet, it still feels like a whisper, not forgotten, just quiet. You imagine now a high, empty valley. The wind moves between the stones. Prayer flags flutter across a cold sky, and somewhere, unseen, a ritual begins, not for fame, not for proof, but for peace. The fire is lit, herbs crackle in the flame, a chant rises, a spiral is drawn, and above it all, a wind horse lifts into the dusk, carrying your breath, your memory, your becoming. The Bon have always believed that life and death are not separate places. They are doorways facing each other, and tonight, you feel the hinge slowly turn. The Ainu spirits among snow and forest in Japan's far north, where winter lasts long into spring, and the forests speak more often than the cities. There lives a people whose faith flows quietly, without monuments, without noise. The Ainu. An indigenous group, native to Hokkaido, and once two parts of Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. The Ainu live close to the land, not in conquest of it, but as its kin. Their spirituality is not written in sacred texts. It is woven into daily life, spoken in chants, carved in wood, and carried on the breath of fire, wind, and water. Central to Ainu belief is the presence of kami, not gods in the distant sky, but spiritual beings that dwell in every part of the world. Each tree, each animal, each stream, each act of fire or weather is a kami in a different form. There is Kimin, kami, the god of the bear; Opossum kami, spirit of the threshold; Kotenkar kami, guardian of the village; and Kami Fuchi, goddess of the hearth, the one who watches over every home, never turning her face away. The Ainu live among these beings. They speak to them not in grand temples, but in rituals made from simplicity. A bowl of sake left in the woods, a carved wand tied with bark shavings, a whisper at the edge of a river. The world is not separate from the divine. It is the divine. Even now, many Ainu homes keep a hearth at their center, not just for warmth, but because Kami Fuchi is believed to reside there. She is never called by name aloud. Out of reverence, when food is shared, a portion is offered to her first. When thanks is given, it begins at her fire. To be Ainu is to carry this remembering that nothing is owned, and nothing ever truly ends. In the deep winters, the Ainu conduct one of their most sacred and misunderstood ceremonies, the Iyomante. It is a ritual of return. A bear cub is raised within the village, fed, sung to, treated with deep respect. The people believe the bear is a kami who has come in disguise to offer blessing and connection. And after a year or more, a ceremony is held to release that spirit, to send it back to the divine realm from which it came. The bear is sacrificed. Its soul, honored with song and offering, is believed to return to the world of the gods. Carrying gifts from the human world to the outsider, this appears cruel. But to the Ainu, it is an act of sacred reciprocity. The bear is never treated as an animal alone. It is always a visitor, always divine. Every part of the bear is used with care. Fur becomes clothing. Bones are preserved with symbols. Meat is shared among the community. But what matters most is not the material. It is the relationship. Ainu rituals are not only for grand moments. They are constant. When a tool is crafted from wood, a prayer is said. When a fish is caught, it is thanked before being prepared. They call this ongoing ritual kami, the spiritual etiquette. It is not superstition. It is a discipline of respect. Language, too, carries this reverence. The Ainu language, nearly erased by colonization and assimilation, is now slowly returning, revived by elders and younger generations alike. In Ainu speech, the natural world is not described as it. Things are not passive. They act. They live. Even the word Ainu means human, not to divide, but to remind. Because to be human, in Ainu thought, is not to dominate. It is to participate. Their clothing tells stories. Traditional robes called etus are woven from tree bark, fiber. Their edges are stitched with bold, spiraling patterns, meant not only for beauty, but to ward off evil spirits. These patterns, handed down across generations, carry the touch of ancestors' hands. Each curve is a form of memory. Each design, a kind of lullaby in thread. The same patterns appear on wooden prayer sticks now, made by shaving willow branches into spirals. They are offered in ceremonies to the kami, often placed near rivers, shrines, or the hearth. The Ainu believe the smoke from their fires carries these offerings upward. Across the thin veil between worlds, songs and dances also hold great meaning, called apobo and rims. They are not performed for applause, but for connection. Chanted in a steady rhythm, these songs speak of seasons, births, hunts, dreams, and of transformation. Because in Ainu belief, nothing stays the same. Not entirely. A soul may move from fox to person, from person to storm, from storm to memory. You begin to feel this rhythm, the way everything flows into something else. Not lost, not forgotten, just changed. The forests of Hokkaido have known this rhythm for centuries, but much of the world tried to silence it. When Japan modernized in the 19th century, Ainu land was seized. Their language was banned in schools. Children were told not to speak of the kami, not to sing the old songs. Many rituals went underground. Some were lost, and yet, not all. In recent decades, the Ainu people have fought for recognition. In 2008, Japan formally acknowledged them as an indigenous people. In 2019, a law was passed to preserve their culture and traditions. Today, you can hear Ainu lullabies again. You can see dances shared in schools and ceremonies. You can visit museums built not to display a lost people, but to honor a living one. But still, the truest form of Ainu spirituality does not exist in glass cases. It lives in the quiet things. A bowl left beside a fire, a carved stick tied with bark, a name spoken into the wind. You imagine now. Snow falling gently on cedar trees, a river frozen at its edges, a robe stitched with curves like wind paths, and within a small wooden house, a hearth flickers. The fire crackles softly. A voice hums a song older than memory, and the spirits listen, comparing the mystical paths across centuries and continents. Belief has taken many shapes. Some are etched into stone, others whispered in the dark, but all begin with the same human impulse, a longing to understand the unseen. Mystical traditions arise not to dominate, but to dissolve the self into something wider. They are not about control, they are about remembering. And when you listen closely, when you step back and look not at their differences, but their rhythms, you begin to hear an ancient kind of harmony in the chants of the Sufis, the silent meditations of Zen monks, the fire dances of Hindu tantrikas, and the midnight prayers of Kabbalists. There is no war. There is no debate. There is only a shared turning inward and upward and beyond. Each mystical path teaches that there is more to reality than what the senses can name. They do not reject the world, but they know it is not the whole story. The Kabbalist maps the soul through the tree of life. Each sephira, a vessel of divine flow, wisdom, mercy, beauty, strength, all balancing toward unity. The Sufi turns in spirals, not to perform, but to become empty. The spinning of the dervish is a form of disappearance, a body becoming prayer, motion becoming silence. In Zen, the path is not filled with symbols or songs. It strips away everything until only breath remains, until the sound of rain on a leaf is enough to awaken the whole heart. And the tantric yogi, moving through breath, sound, and inner fire, does not escape the body, but enters it fully, finding the sacred in sensation, the divine in form. Each path is like a flute, different in shape, different in tone, but playing the same air. These traditions speak through different languages, yet they share deep structures of thought. Most view time not as linear, but cyclical. They understand life as a series of veils to be lifted, not problems to be solved. They speak of transformation, not just belief, but becoming. The mystical path is not satisfied with hearing about truth. It wants to taste it, to dissolve into it, to be it. Symbols in these traditions are not decoration, they are vessels. The Sufis, rose, blooming in the chest, the Kabbalists' flame, dancing above the candle. the Zen circle, drawn in one breath, the yantra, with its interlocking triangles and lotus petals that all point beyond themselves. All speak in the language of silence. Water is a common symbol in nearly every mystical system. A river flowing toward union, a drop dissolving into the ocean, a current washing away illusion, and fire that does not destroy, but purifies. You begin to notice how these elements aren't metaphors alone. They are practices, states of being. The mystic does not just imagine water. They become still, like water. They do not just invoke fire. They burn through layers of self, layers of thought, identity, attachment. Even in ritual, there is deep commonality. The chant, the mantra, the zikar, the psalm, all use repetition to bypass the surface mind. The breath is slowed, the gaze softened, and the boundary between self and world begins to blur. In Sufi gatherings, the names of God are repeated, not for explanation, but for immersion. In tantric mantra, the syllables are said to carry divine vibration, not meaning, in the logical sense, but medicine for the subtle body. Kabbalists meditate on Hebrew letters, seeing them as building blocks of creation. Each letter, a doorway, each shape alive. Even Zen, in its silence, is a kind of mantra, the sound of no sound, the clearing of thought through presence. There is no conflict among these paths, only different temperatures of the same light. Some use the language of God, others of emptiness. Some speak of union, others of awakening, but all seek to pierce the illusion that you are separate, that you are alone. And so, they invite you to soften, to return to stillness, not as an escape, but as the deepest form of contact. You begin to feel it now, the slow exhale of the mystic's way. No judgment, no needing to be right, only the quiet pull toward what's real. Even when written, texts differ. When one path speaks of divine will, and another of non-duality, the experiential core is the same. A release of ego, a turning toward presence, a remembering of the sacred. Mysticism teaches that the divine cannot be captured in words, only approached in silence, or song, or surrender. It does not demand belief. It invites openness. You notice that the mystical path often begins where systems fail. When logic reaches its end, when rules begin to feel hollow, the mystic listens for a deeper rhythm. And when no teacher can give the answer, the mystic goes within, not to find control, but to meet the unknown. Each culture expresses this in its own shape, but the movement is always the same. From mind to heart, from self to stillness, and then to something larger, something wordless in that space. All division begins to soften. Religions that once seemed in conflict now feel like siblings. Traditions that once seemed foreign now feel strangely familiar. Because when you walk far enough into your own tradition, you find echoes of the others. And if you walk far enough into any of them, you disappear, not into nothingness, but into a kind of vast, breathing unity. The mystic is not interested in being seen, only in seeing, not in preaching, only in listening. And so, across time's sky, you begin to notice them, each belief like a star, not competing, but shining quietly in its own place. There is no rush to name them, no pressure to choose, only the soft unfolding of something sacred that is always lived beneath the surface. You feel it now, not in words, not in thoughts, just a stillness, deep, quiet, familiar. And in the hush of that moment, as breath settles, you realize each flute plays its own melody. But the song is the same. You, the silent symbol not. Every truth is meant to be spoken. Not every symbol is carved in stone. Some are lived, some outbreathed. Some, like you, are simply present. After all the names, the texts, the teachings, there is this, the quiet weight of your own being. And that, too, is sacred. You are not just a listener in this vast spiritual story. You are a thread woven into its center, not above it, not outside of it, within it, always. The ancient mystics did not see the seeker as separate from the path. They understood the journey itself was written into the body, into the breath, into the patterns of thought and stillness. To them, you were not a student of symbols. You were a symbol, one that cannot be explained, but only recognized. The Kabbalists spoke of the soul as a fragment of divine light, a spark concealed within, the layers of form, not to be fixed, but to be revealed. The Sufi teacher said the heart is not a vessel for truth. It is the truth once polished, once cleared, in Buddhist thought. There is the idea of the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature, already present in all beings, waiting not to be added, but uncovered. These are not philosophies to memorize. They are reminders of what you already carry, because what you seek was never lost, and what you are has always been part of the sacred. There is no final doctrine to hold, no system to perfect. The mystic paths do not give you answers so much as they empty the questions. They leave space, and in that space, you begin to sense what words cannot hold. It is a quiet knowing, not made of facts or logic, but of stillness, of being here with breath, with time, with the invisible thread that connects all things. You are not a believer in isolation. You are a participant in a mystery that does not need belief to be true. Even the symbols you've learned to revere, the lotus, the flame, the cross, the eye, they point not outward, but inward. The truth they carry is not about their shape, but the state they call forth. You begin to notice this in subtle ways, in the way silence feels different now, in the way the dark holds warmth, not absence. You are no longer reaching for something beyond the horizon. You are settling into what has always been. This is not surrender in the sense of giving up. It is a different kind of release, not the fall of effort, but the rise of presence. To become still in a world of noise is not weakness, it is sacred, defiance. And in that stillness, you become the symbol. You carry forward the flame of understanding, not by teaching, not by preaching, but by being, by walking gently, by listening deeply, by remembering quietly. The Sufi poet Rumi once said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." That is what the mystics mean when they say the divine is within, not as a metaphor, not as a hopeful idea, but as an experienced truth felt when all else becomes quiet. Even now, in the rhythm of your breath, there is a sacred pattern. Inhale, pause, exhale, like a mantra of the body, like a prayer with no words. The universe has always spoken this way, not just through stars and scriptures, but through you, through your stillness, through your noticing. You are not an outsider to this sacred story. You are the living scripture, not written on paper, but in presence. This is what the mystics knew, that the symbols are not only around you, they are you, the way your attention softens, the way you pause before reacting, the way you hold silence when words would be easy. These too are rituals. These too are sacred acts. There is a kind of remembrance that does not happen in the mind. It happens in the breath, in the space between moments, and the feeling that nothing needs to be added, not because you know everything, but because you trust what is. In this final turning, you are no longer a seeker, chasing something hidden. You are the one who remembers, who rests in the middle of the mystery, not needing to solve it. Like the mystics of every path, you walk forward now, not with answers, but with presence. Not to prove, not to explain, only to be . And that is enough. The sacred does not need your perfection, only your attention, your quiet willingness to feel, to pause, to allow . The divine, if it lives anywhere, lives in that pause, in the exhale after longing, in the stillness after seeking, in the place where you realize what you were looking for has always lived here, just beneath the noise. So tonight, you carry forward the flame, not as doctrine, not as dogma, but as something felt, something real, something quietly alive in you. And as the breath slows, you do not fall asleep so much as return. Return to the stillness that made you. Return to the silence that teaches. Return to the truth that has no shape, but every meaning. A truth that waits, not in books or temples, but in you. And you remember now what was never forgotten. Sufis of the whirling heart, in the Anatolian city of Konya. The night air settles with a fragrance that has drifted through centuries. Roses, damp stone, and the faint trace of incense. From a nearby lodge, the streets grow quiet after sunset. Lamps throw small circles of light onto cobblestone, and the sound of footsteps softens, as if the city itself is preparing for prayer. Here, in this place, the Mevli Sufis once gathered, in courtyards to turn in slow, deliberate circles. The turning was not for an audience, it was for the soul. They believed that movement, when rooted in remembrance, could become an act of worship, a way of stepping beyond the self, toward the one they called the beloved. The Mevli, the order, traces itself to Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, a 13th century mystic whose poetry still flows across cultures and languages. Born in what is now Afghanistan, Rumi's path brought him here, to Konya, where his meeting with a wandering dervish named Shams of Tabriz transformed his life. Their conversations intense, private, often silent, unlocked a deep yearning. In Rumi, one that would be shaped into verse and into a living tradition. The Sufis speak of the soul as a moth, forever drawn toward the flame. For Rumi, that flame was the divine presence, and the moth's flight was both beautiful and perilous. In his words, the self must be burned away, leaving only light. The Mevlevis took this image into the body itself, creating the Sema, a ritual of music, recitation, and turning. Where the dervish embodies the soul's journey toward God, the ceremony begins in stillness. The dervishes wear long white robes, their skirts stitched wide to catch the air as they spin. Over the white, they place a black cloak, symbolizing the tomb of the ego. On their heads sits the Sikh, a tall felt hat representing the gravestone of the self. Slowly, the black cloak is removed, revealing the white, the soul's rebirth into truth. A single note of the ney, the reed flute, pierces the silence. The ney is central to Sufi symbolism, hollowed from reed and shaped by fire. It becomes a vessel for breath, much as the human being becomes a vessel for divine spirit. Its tone is plaintive, longing, almost human. Rumi himself likened the sound of the ney to the soul's cry for its source, a memory of being cut from the reed bed of eternity. The dervishes step forward in unison, right hand open and raised toward the heavens, left hand turned downward toward the earth. Each spin moves counterclockwise around the heart. Inwardly, they recite the name of God, letting the rhythm of breath and body merge into a state of remembrance. Dhikr. It is said that the turning mirrors the rotation of the planets around the sun, the atoms around their nucleus, the galaxies in the cosmos. The body becomes part of a greater circle, one that has no beginning and no end. For those who witness it, the Sema can seem both impossibly disciplined and effortlessly free. The faces of the dervishes are serene, the eyes half closed, as though listening to something far deeper than the music. The movement is sustained for minutes, then hours. Carried by the flow of devotion, fatigue falls away. The body's ordinary limits dissolve. In Sufi thought, every part of the ritual carries a layer of meaning. The floor of the Semahain, the hall where the turning takes place, is circular, a symbol of the universe. The sheikh, or spiritual guide, sits at the head, representing the sun, while the dervishes turn like planets in harmonious orbit. The music, too, follows a set pattern, a progression from the call of the ney, to the rise of drums and strings, to the steady pulse that supports the turning. But beyond the form, there is the purpose, to remember. The Arabic word for this is dhikr, and it is the heart of all Sufi practice. Whether through turning, chanting, or silent meditation, the aim is the same: to keep the heart awake to the divine presence, to let every movement and breath point toward the One. Historically, the Mevlev order held an important place in the Ottoman world. They were known not only for their spiritual discipline, but for their role in music, poetry, and art. Their lodges served as places of hospitality and learning, where travelers could rest, and where students could study both religious texts and the skills of calligraphy, illumination, and composition. The circle of their whirling extended into daily life, shaping a culture of refinement and service. The symbolism of the polished mirror appears often in Sufi teaching. The heart, they say, is like a mirror, capable of reflecting divine light, but dulled by the dust of distraction and self-interest. Through remembrance, through love, the heart is polished until it can reflect the beloved clearly. In the turning, the dervish seeks that clarity. Each rotation a sweep of the cloth against the mirror's surface. There is also a humility in the Mevlev path. Though the whirling has become famous around the world, within the tradition, it is not a performance but a discipline. The aim is not to be seen, but to disappear, to let the self dissolve into the act of turning, until only the remembrance remains. Even for those who do not turn, the image of the whirling dervish has become a symbol of spiritual longing. It speaks of movement without destination, of devotion expressed in the simplest of human gestures: to stand, to open the hands, to turn. In Konya, the tomb of Rumi still draws pilgrims. They walk the quiet pathways of the Mevlana Museum, pausing before the green-tiled dome. Inside, the air is heavy with reverence. Verses are inscribed on the walls in elegant script, each a thread connecting the visitor to the centuries of seekers who have come before. The calligraphy curves like the path of the turning, unbroken, continuous, flowing toward its source. Outside, the wind moves softly through the gardens. The roses still bloom in season, and the scent mingles with the stone's cool breath. Somewhere, perhaps in a nearby lodge, the ney begins to play again. Its voice is the same as it was in Rumi's time, a thin line of longing carried on the air. For those who have turned, the sensation never quite leaves. Even in stillness, the body remembers the circle. The heart, once opened in remembrance, does not close entirely. The Mevlev say that to turn is to enter a conversation without words, one that continues long after the music ends. In the quiet of Kanya's night, the thought lingers. Movement can be prayer. Breath can be remembrance. The heart can turn, even when the body is still. And somewhere within that turning, the moth draws closer to the flame. The Samaritans, between two temples and the slopes of Mount Gerizim, the wind carries the faint scent of thyme and stone dust. The hilltop stands above the surrounding valleys, looking out over the land where so many stories of faith were born. Here, a small community holds fast to an identity shaped across more than 2,000 years. They call themselves Shamorim, guardians, or keepers, a name that reflects their view of themselves as protectors of the original covenant. The Samaritans are a people whose history runs alongside the history of the Jewish nation, intersecting, often but never fully merging. They trace their heritage to the northern tribes of ancient Israel, those who lived in the kingdom of Israel after it separated from the southern kingdom of Judah. While the Jewish tradition centers its holiest site in Jerusalem, the Samaritans look to Mount Gerizim as the place chosen by God for his name to dwell. For them, this mountain is not just geography, it is the center of the world. Their version of the Torah reflects this belief, written in an ancient script that preserves letter forms no longer used in mainstream Jewish texts. The Samaritan Pentateuch is both familiar and different. It contains the same 5 books of Moses, but with variations in wording and emphasis, especially in passages about where sacrifices are to be offered. The Samaritan text places Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem, as the appointed sanctuary over centuries. This difference in sacred geography deepened the divide between Samaritan and Jewish communities. Life for the Samaritans has never been without pressure. History records times when they were powerful and populous, and other times when their numbers dwindled dangerously low. Conquests, forced conversions, and political shifts all threatened their survival. Yet the community endured, carrying forward their rituals and beliefs with quiet determination. One of their most important traditions is the Passover sacrifice. While most Jewish communities ceased animal sacrifice after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, the Samaritans have continued the practice on Mount Gerizim. Each spring, as the sun begins to set, the community gathers in white robes. Families stand together in a large open space. Priests wearing distinctive red fezzes oversee the preparations, and lambs are brought forward. The slaughter is swift, done according to the instructions in their Torah. The meat is roasted in deep pits, lined with stones. The fires glow, casting long shadows across the gathering. This rite is not a reenactment for the sake of memory alone. For the Samaritans, it is a living commandment, part of the same covenant their ancestors received. In the flicker of the fire, the connection between past and present feels unbroken. Their liturgy is chanted in an ancient dialect of Hebrew, one that retains sounds lost in modern pronunciation. The cadence is steady, rising and falling like the wind against the mountain. For an outsider, the words may be unfamiliar, but the effect is unmistakable, a sense of continuity, of voices joining with the countless generations who have spoken. The same lines on the same ground, symbols anchor their identity. The Lamb of Passover speaks of liberation and obedience to divine instruction. The scroll represents the unaltered covenant, preserved through centuries of upheaval. The mountain itself is perhaps the most enduring symbol, visible from their homes. Constant and unmoved, it mirrors their own refusal to shift their faith's foundation. Their community is small, numbering only in the hundreds today, split, mainly between Mount Gerizim in the West Bank and the city of Holon in Israel. Modern life touches them, yet their religious calendar, priestly leadership, and adherence to their text remain central. They marry within the community to maintain continuity, a practice that has both strengthened their identity and challenged them with the realities of limited numbers. Despite their small size, the Samaritans maintain a priesthood that traces its lineage directly back to Aaron, the brother of Moses. The high priest plays a vital role in guiding religious practice, settling matters of interpretation, and leading the community in worship. Authority here is rooted not in political power, but in the weight of tradition and memory. Mount Gerizim itself is layered with history. Archaeological remains suggest it has been a place of worship for thousands of years. The Samaritans identified it with the location where Joshua built an altar after entering the Promised Land. As recorded in their Torah, they believe it is also where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son, a detail that, in their telling, differs from the Jewish tradition, which places that event on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. To stand on Gerizim during one of their festivals is to stand in a place where their story and the land's story are inseparable. The division between Jews and Samaritans is as much about identity as it is about theology. In ancient times, the rivalry could be sharp. Historical accounts describe disputes, political opposition, and even violence. In the Gospels, the tension is reflected in the parable of the Good Samaritan, which uses the unexpected kindness of a Samaritan traveler to challenge prejudice. Today, relations are less hostile, but still shaped by long centuries of difference. For the Samaritans, the survival of their way of life has meant holding tightly to their own customs while living alongside larger cultures. It has required resilience in the face of change and a willingness to remain small rather than lose what they see as the heart of their faith. Their story is not one of conquest or expansion, but of preservation, a thread of belief carried quietly through the noise of history. When evening settles over Mount Gerizim, the view stretches far across the hills and valleys. Lights begin to glow in the villages below, and the mountain takes on the deep blue of night. In the homes of the Samaritan families, sacred texts rest in careful storage, brought out for reading on Sabbaths and festivals. Their script is angular, elegant, each character a shape preserved from an earlier age. To read it is to enter into a conversation with the past, one that is never rushed and never abandoned. The Samaritans' covenant has survived empires and centuries of political change. It survives still, not because of great numbers or worldly influence, but because a small group chose not to move when the rest of the world shifted around them. Their mountain remains their temple, their scripture remains their guide, and their gatherings beneath the open sky continue to tie them to those who came before. As naturally as the wind moves through the grass on Gerizim's slopes, even in silence, the place holds their history. The stones do not speak, yet they have watched countless Passovers, countless prayers rising into the night air. And somewhere in that stillness, between two temples, a covenant is kept. Shakers, dancing into the spirit across the soft hills and open pastures of 18th century America, the Shakers began to gather. They were not born into the land they would shape. Most came as seekers, leaving behind the noise of towns and the weight of old traditions. They called themselves the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, but to those who watched them from a distance, they were simply the Shakers, named for the trembling and swaying that often overtook them in worship. They believed that God's Spirit moved, not in still silence alone, but in the living body, through the feet, the hands, the shoulders, and the breath. Their meetings began with quiet prayer, but soon, the sound of voices would rise. Hymns, sung without embellishment, would weave through the air. Then, the wooden floors of their meeting houses would begin to echo, first with soft, measured steps, then with the full rhythmic movement of a congregation in motion. Shaker dance was not performance, it was devotion. Men and women danced together, though never in physical contact, moving in lines, circles, and mirrored patterns. Each step was an offering, each turn a surrender. They believed this was the physical proof of the Holy Spirit's arrival, a visible sign that God had entered the room. Their lives reflected the same clarity that shaped their worship. In every Shaker settlement, buildings were simple but perfect in proportion. Walls were painted in pale shades to reflect the light. Floors were scrubbed to a quiet glow. Furniture was plain, yet crafted with such precision that each table leg, each dovetail joint, seemed to carry its own quiet blessing. They believed that every act of work, planing a piece of wood, weaving a basket, sweeping a floor, could be a prayer if done with the right heart. Equality was the foundation of their order. Men and women held the same spiritual authority. They ate the same food, wore similar clothing, and shared the same responsibilities. The Shakers rejected private property and lived communally, pooling their labor and resources. They also embraced celibacy, believing that complete devotion to God required the release of earthly marriage and procreation. New members came from conversions, from children given into their care, and from those who felt the pull of their simple, ordered life. Their songs were as unadorned as their homes. Many were brief, with only a few lines repeated again and again, carrying a soft, hypnotic rhythm. One of their most enduring hymns, Simple Gifts, captured the heart of their faith, that true freedom is found in humility, and that joy is discovered when the soul is aligned with divine will. Work and worship blended until there was no clear division. A Shaker might spend the morning tending gardens, the afternoon building furniture, and the evening dancing until breathless. Even in times of rest, their rhythm continued, the quiet heartbeat of a life devoted to God in every movement. As the years passed, outsiders often traveled to see the Shakers worship. Some came with curiosity, others with suspicion. Their strange dances and unusual rules set them apart from the surrounding world. Yet those who stayed long enough to watch often spoke of a feeling they could not explain, a sense of harmony that seemed to belong to another time, or perhaps to a place beyond time. The Shakers believed they were building a piece of heaven on earth. In their gardens, in their meeting houses, in their songs, they sought to live as they imagined souls might live in the eternal kingdom, without greed, without division, without the noise of ambition. Today, only a handful remain, yet the spirit of their movement lingers. It is in the clean lines of their furniture, still valued centuries later. It is in the preserved meeting houses that still hold the echo of feet on wood. And it is in the quiet idea that worship can be lived in every action, every breath, and every moment of honest work. Somewhere, in a sunlit room, you can almost hear the soft rhythm of their steps, the measured turning, the voices lifted without ornament, the floor beneath them trembling with devotion. You imagine the circle of dancers, faces serene, eyes lifted not to the ceiling, but to the unseen presence they believe stands among them. And even in stillness, you feel that rhythm, a heartbeat that does not fade when the dance ends. The heartbeat of the Shakers was not born in America. It began across the ocean, in the damp air of industrial England. There, in the mid-1700s, A woman named Anne Lee worked in textile mills, her hands raw from labor, her spirit restless under the weight of the world around her. Anne was the daughter of a blacksmith, and from an early age, she was drawn to matters of faith. But the established church, with its rigid hierarchy and empty formality, felt lifeless to her. She longed for something that moved the soul, something that could be felt not only in the mind but in the body, a worship that could burn away the dross of sin and awaken the heart. Her visions began in her youth, visions of purity, of a world free from lust and greed, of a kingdom where men and women stood as equals before God. She spoke of a Christ who would return not in the form of a man alone, but in the completeness of both male and female. To the few who believed her, she was Mother Anne, chosen to lead a new way. The early followers called themselves the Shaking Quakers, because in worship they trembled, cried out, and sometimes collapsed under the weight of spiritual ecstasy. These gatherings drew suspicion. England in that age had little tolerance for religious dissent, and soon Anne and her companions faced imprisonment. But in 1774, Anne said God had given her a clear command: cross the ocean and begin anew in the New World. She and 8 followers boarded a ship to America. The voyage was long and punishing, but on the other side lay vast lands and the promise of freedom to worship without fear. The Shakers settled first in New York, living quietly and simply, working the land and holding worship in the open air. Over time, word of them spread, of their strange dancing, their refusal to marry, their belief in communal living. Some mocked them, others were moved, feeling in their presence a purity they had not known elsewhere. By the early 1800s, Shaker villages began to appear across the Northeast and Midwest. From Maine to Kentucky, the settlements followed a familiar pattern: a central meeting house, flanked by clean white dwellings, long barns, workshops, and fields tilled with care. They lived by the rule: hands to work, hearts to God. Each day was shaped by labor and worship in equal measure. They grew their own food, wove their own cloth, crafted their own tools and furniture. Their inventions like the flat broom, the circular saw, and improved seed packets would quietly change everyday life in America. The Shakers thrived in part because they welcomed anyone willing to live by their vows. Orphans, widows, and the disillusioned found refuge in their villages. In the stillness of their orderly world, some discovered a peace they had never known, and yet there was a fragility to their way of life. Their commitment to celibacy meant they could not grow by natural birth. Each new generation depended on the arrival of outsiders who felt called to join. As America surged into the industrial age, fewer were willing to embrace a life without possessions, marriage, or personal ambition. By the late 19th century, their numbers began to wane. Factories and cities pulled people toward faster, noisier lives. The once bustling villages grew quiet. One by one, the Shaker communities closed. Still, those who remained kept the old ways alive. In Sabbath Day Lake, Maine, the last active Shaker community, the hymn singing continues. The gardens are still tended, the furniture still made by hand. Visitors who walk through those grounds speak of a calm unlike any other, as if the air itself carries the memory of centuries of prayer. The Shakers left behind more than their buildings and their songs. They left an idea that life could be lived in a constant state of worship, that simplicity could be a form of beauty, and that even the most ordinary act could be a thread in the fabric of devotion. Close your eyes now and imagine you are standing in a Shaker meeting house. The air smells faintly of pine from the scrubbed floors. Sunlight falls in quiet rectangles through the windows. You hear the faintest tap of feet beginning to move, the hum of voices rising in song. The lines begin to form, men on one side, women on the other, moving in mirrored steps. There is no applause here, no performance for the world outside, only the sound of feet, the steady breathing of the dancers, and the invisible presence they believe walks among them. And as the dance goes on, you realize that this is not just movement, it is prayer in motion, a living hymn. Even when the music ends, the silence hums with the echo of what came before. You step outside, into the open air, and carry with you the same thing the Shakers carried across centuries, the conviction that heaven is not only a distant promise, but something that can be built, step by simple step, in the here and now. The Shakers' presence in America may have faded in number, but it has never disappeared in spirit. Their hands shaped more than wood and cloth. They shaped an ideal of purity and purpose that still whispers in the corners of American culture. Their furniture, once built for necessity alone, became a kind of art without meaning to be art. The clean lines, the unadorned surfaces, the perfect proportions, all spoke of a mind turned away from excess and toward harmony. Today, collectors search for Shaker chairs, tables, and cupboards, not only for their beauty, but for the philosophy hidden in their design, that form and function are not enemies, but partners in service of the greater good. Their songs, too, escaped the walls of their meeting houses, simple gifts, first sung in the mid-1800s by Shaker elder Joseph Brackett, found new life in modern music, woven into symphonies, folk records, and even the stage. Its plain words, "'Tis the gift to be simple," became a kind of prayer for those far beyond the Shaker faith, a reminder that joy is not buried in wealth, but found in the turning toward what is right and true. Their gardens influenced farming practices with a quiet revolution. The Shakers believed every seed was a gift from God, and they treated planting as an act of worship. They developed precise methods for drying, storing, and selling seeds, becoming among the first in America to sell them in paper packets. A small innovation that allowed families across the young nation to cultivate their own food more easily. Even their governance carried lessons. Shaker villages were divided into families, not by blood, but by shared work and devotion. Each family had leaders, both a man and a woman, serving side by side in spiritual and practical matters. It was, in its time, a radical equality. Women could preach, administer, and make decisions, just as men did. A rare vision in a world where leadership was almost entirely male. And yet, the Shakers did not set out to be pioneers of social reform. They did not march or petition. They simply lived as they believed the kingdom of heaven demanded. Their protest was in their example, in a life that refused to be shaped by greed, lust, or rivalry. But such purity is costly. The 20th century brought an America driven by speed, invention, and individual ambition. The slow rhythm of Shaker life seemed out of step with the rushing heartbeat of modernity, as railroads, automobiles, and radios connected towns and cities. The isolation that once protected Shaker villages now left them behind by mid-century. Most Shaker communities had closed, their land sold, their meeting houses turned into museums, or left to weather quietly in the fields. Some feared that the faith itself would vanish with the last of its members. Yet the Shakers have never fully disappeared. In Maine, at Sabbath Day Lake, a handful of believers still rise each morning to the same prayers, tend the same gardens, and sing the same hymns that were sung 2 centuries ago. They welcome visitors, not to convert them, but to share what remains of their way of life. Standing there, in that small surviving village, you can see how little has changed. The buildings still bear the pale paint that catches the light just so. The tools in the workshops are worn smooth from decades of use. The gardens are neat, the rows perfectly spaced, as if laid out by a ruler. And in the meeting house the floor is ready for the feet of dancers, even if there are fewer to join the line. The Shaker legacy endures not because they sought to leave monuments, but because they sought to leave nothing false. Every chair they built, every seed they planted, every step they danced was real, done with full attention and an open heart. In that, their lives became a quiet sermon, one that still speaks to those willing to hear it. And perhaps this is why their story matters now more than ever. In an age of noise, they remind us of the music found in silence. In a time of endless want, they remind us of the beauty in having enough. In a world that hurries forward, they remind us of the power of stepping in time with something eternal. Close your eyes again. The hum of modern life fades. You are in the meeting house once more. The wooden floor is cool beneath your feet. The air holds the faint scent of beeswax and wood smoke. The voices rise, unadorned and unhurried. Each word a step, each step a prayer. The circle turns. The faces are calm. The room trembles, not from the weight of the world, but from the joy of those who have, for a moment, found the kingdom they were seeking. And when the dance ends, the stillness is deep. You step outside into the open air, and for a heartbeat, just one, you feel that you, too, could live this way. Zoroastrians, the eternal flame in the desert heart of Iran. In the old city of Yazd, there stands a temple whose breath is fire. Not the fire of war or destruction, but a flame that has burned for more than 1,000 years. Never once allowed to die. Inside, the air is still. The sound of the street fades behind thick walls, and the scent of wood and ash lingers in the dim light. Here, the fire burns in a bronze vessel, its glow steady, never wavering, its warmth touching every corner. Priests in white robes tend to it with slow, deliberate movements, adding fuel with care, their hands never allowing shadow or breath to disturb the sacred light. This is the Atash Baram, the highest grade of fire in the Zoroastrian faith. It is more than heat, more than light. It is Asha itself, the divine order, the truth that holds the cosmos together. In the faith of Zarathustra, fire is not worshipped as a god, but revered as the purest of all creations, a mirror to the eternal radiance of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. You imagine sitting cross-legged before it, the warmth resting on your face, the flicker reflecting in your eyes. Outside, the desert wind carries dust through empty streets. But in here, time does not move. The priests chant the Gathas hymns, said to have been composed by Zarathustra himself. Their words are in Avestan, the old tongue, heavy with meaning, yet light in sound. They tell of the struggle between two primal forces, Asha, the path of truth and harmony, and Druze, the path of the lie, of chaos and deceit. In Zoroastrian thought, this is not a distant myth, but the very fabric of human life. Every choice, every word, every thought pulls the world toward one side or the other. And so, tending the fire is not just ritual, it is an act of cosmic responsibility, a declaration that the order of the universe will not be abandoned. You watch as the Kusti, the sacred cord, is wrapped and unwrapped by worshippers, their prayers whispered with each movement. They wash their hands before approaching the flame, for purity in thought, word, and deed is not symbolic here. It is a living rule. Fire must never be polluted. Even the breath is kept from touching it, for the human mouth carries the corruption of mortality. Beside the fire, a basin of water stands clear, still, untouched, except for the rites that call upon it. For water, like fire, is a purifier. One cleanses with heat and light, the other with coolness and flow. Together, they form the pillars of Zoroastrian ritual life, each guarding against the creeping touch of decay. On the walls above the chamber, carved in stone, spreads the Faravahar, the winged symbol of the soul. Its human figure stands within, the disk of eternity, one hand raised in blessing, the other holding the ring of covenant. The wings are split into 3 tiers: good thoughts, good words, good deeds, the threefold path by which the soul draws nearer to the light. You feel the weight of the symbol. It is not an abstract emblem, but a map of the soul's journey through the mortal life, across the bridge of judgment, and into the realms beyond. In Zoroastrian teaching, when the body dies, the soul waits for 3 nights beside it. On the 4th dawn, it is led to the Chinvate bridge, where its deeds are weighed. The righteous pass into the house of song, a realm of light, fragrance, and joy, while the deceitful fall into the house of lies, where darkness and stench fill eternity. The fire here is a reminder of that passage. To stand before it is to stand in the presence of the uncorrupted, to remember that life is short, but the path of the soul stretches far beyond its final breath. The sound of the Cathars rises and falls. Each syllable carries centuries, like pebbles smoothed in a river. Zarathustra's voice, though long silent in the world, is alive in this moment. His call to choose truth over falsehood echoing in the stillness. Outside the temple, the world turns quickly now. Machines hum, cities blaze with neon light. But this flame has no need for hurry. It has watched empires rise and collapse into sand. It has seen rulers and invaders pass through these deserts, each thinking they would leave their mark. The fire remembers them all, but burns for none. A priest approaches, his robe spotless, his head covered, his eyes lowered. He tents the flame with hands that move like water, careful, measured, certain. When he steps back, the fire swells for a moment, then returns to its steady breathing. You imagine staying here until the mind softens and thought grows light, until the sound of the hymns and the glow of the fire become one thing, a single presence. Until the struggle between truth and the lie feels less like an ancient story and more like a choice you make in every hour of your own life. Somewhere, in that stillness, you realize the fire does not need you to protect it. It has burned before you were born and will burn long after you are gone. But perhaps, in its patient glow, it is you who needs it, and in the quiet, you simply breathe, the warmth resting on your skin, the symbol above watching with wings outstretched as the eternal flame burns on. The world outside could be centuries away. The streets of Yazd might as well be the winding alleys of an ancient city, where merchants once carried silk and spice along the desert's edge. The fire has witnessed them all, glowing quietly as history moved like a tide beyond its walls. It is said that such fires have been kept alive through invasion, famine, and exile. When danger approached, the priests carried embers in hidden vessels, crossing mountains and deserts to ensure that the light was never extinguished. For them, it was not simply a flame, it was the heart of their faith. To let it die would be to admit defeat and the eternal struggle against darkness. The Gathas speak of this struggle in tones both intimate and cosmic. Zarathustra's words do not tell of distant gods fighting in unreachable skies. They tell of the choice each person faces every day, to live in truth, or to turn toward the lie. And here in the temple, as the hymns flow through the dim chamber, you feel the weight of that choice. It is not dramatic, it is quiet, but it is constant. Purity, in this tradition, is not about harsh rules for the sake of discipline. It is about maintaining harmony with the creation of Ahura Mazda. Water, fire, earth, and air are sacred because they are untainted gifts. To pollute them is to wound the balance of the world. This is why the priests guard the flame so carefully, and why every act within the temple is deliberate. Above the altar, the Pharaoh Vihar watches, a reminder that the soul's journey does not end here. It passes through the bridge of judgment, where no deception can hide the truth of a life. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds, these are not mere ideals, but the soul's provisions for the journey ahead. Some visitors to the temple sit for hours, saying nothing. They watch the fire as if listening to something only it can speak. Its movements are small, a bend to one side, a gentle rise, the slow fall of a flame curling back toward the wood. Yet within it is a stillness that seems older than the walls around it. Outside, the desert night can be bitter cold, but here the warmth gathers around you. It seeps into the bones, loosening the weight of thought. The hymns have ended now, and only the quiet remains. Somewhere far away, another fire burns, in another temple, tended by hands you will never see. And somewhere in the deep past, a priest stood as you do now, feeling the same warmth, hearing the same silence. You realize, as you sit, that this flame will likely still be burning long after your own story is over. Generations will come and go. Empires will rise and fall. And still, in this quiet room, light will flicker against the walls, steady as the turning of the stars. You let that thought rest with you, not as sadness, but as peace. In a world that changes too quickly, there is comfort in knowing that some things are kept alive simply because they are worth keeping. And as your eyes grow heavy, the last thing you see is the fire's slow dance, a small, constant sun, breathing in the heart of the temple, carrying the truth forward into the ages. Kabbalists, the tree of hidden lighting, a quiet chamber in medieval Spain, where stone walls hold the night at bay. A single candle flickers. Its flame bends and straightens with the smallest shift of air, casting long shadows over parchment covered in careful ink. Here, the Kabbalists gather, not in great halls or public synagogues, but in rooms hidden from the eyes of the curious, where every movement is deliberate and every word is weighed. Their focus is the tree of life, not a tree of bark and leaf, but of 10 luminous spheres, the Sephirot, each one an aspect of the divine radiating into the world. They speak of Ain, Soph, the infinite, which cannot be seen, touched, or contained. From this boundless source, light descends, not in one rush, but in measured streams, passing through each sephira, shaping the worlds, forming the soul, breathing order into what would otherwise remain formless. The parchment before them holds diagrams of the tree, its branches drawn as paths between spheres. The lines are not mere symbols, they are channels of creation, pathways by which the infinite becomes the finite. The Kabbalists trace them with fingers, as though feeling for the pulse of the cosmos beneath the page. Hebrew letters, each drawn with precision, curl and stand along the margins. To the untrained eye, they are words. To the mystics, they are vessels of power, each letter containing a spark of the light that spoke the universe into being. The sound of them, when whispered, seems to change the air itself. For every letter is shaped by the breath, and in that breath is the echo of the Creator. They do not study for curiosity's sake. Their work is tikkun olam, the repair of the world, for they believe creation, though holy, is fractured. Divine light is scattered among the shards of matter, trapped within the weight of the everyday, and by understanding the tree, by aligning themselves with its flow, they can help restore the harmony between heaven and earth. You imagine sitting among them, the glow of candlelight on the faces of those lost in thought. Outside the streets are quiet, yet here the air is full, thick with the soft rhythm of breathing, the scratch of ink, the unhurried turning of pages. A Kabbalist lifts his eyes from the parchment, closing them for a moment as if listening inward. In his mind, the tree rises its roots in the mystery of the infinite, its branches stretching into the realm of human action. At the top is Keter, the crown, the purest will of God, beyond thought or form. Below it flows Chokmah wisdom, a flash of insight that bursts like lightning. Then comes Bina, understanding, where that lightning is shaped, given structure and depth. The tree continues downward, chest-loving kindness, reaching outward in generosity. Gavira, strength, and discipline, setting boundaries where love alone might lose its way. Tiferet, beauty, the balance where mercy and justice meet. And further still, Netzach, endurance, the force that carries things forward. Hod, humility and gratitude. Yesod, the foundation, channeling all that flows above into the realm where life is lived. Finally, Malkut, the kingdom, the world, as it is, infused with the presence of all that came before it. This is not simply theology to them. It is a map of being itself, of the universe, of the soul, of the relationship between human and divine. The candlelight catches in the curves of the letters on the parchment. You watch as a scholar carefully writes the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, pausing before each stroke. The air seems to still around him. It is not superstition, it is reverence. To write the name is to acknowledge the gap between language and what it seeks to name. The Kabbalists do not believe they can command God. That would be arrogance. Instead, they seek alignment to turn their own lives into channels through which divine light can flow unhindered. When they meditate on the letters, on the Sephiro, on the stories of the Torah, it is not only to understand, but to transform. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere in the city, a bell tolls, marking the passage of hours. Yet here in the candlelit room, time moves differently. Minutes stretch, as though drawn long by the weight of thought. The air is warm, scented faintly with beeswax and old parchment. You close your eyes and feel the tree above you, not as something far away, but as a canopy under which you sit. Its branches reach outward in every direction, and through them, light filters down. It is not harsh sunlight, but a steady, gentle glow, enough to see by, enough to follow. Somewhere deep within, you sense the idea that every life, no matter how ordinary it may seem, is a branch of this tree. Every act of kindness, every choice toward truth, every word spoken with care, all are streams of light returning upward, healing what is broken. The candle burns lower. The mystics gather, their scrolls, speaking softly, their words weaving between Hebrew and the tongues of their homeland. The diagrams of the tree are rolled away, but in their minds, It remains a structure as real as the streets they will walk when they leave this place, and as the door closes behind them, the light they have studied, whispered about, and carried in their hearts spills quietly into the night, unseen by most, but no less present. You remain a moment longer, beneath the unseen branches, feeling that light settle over you, not as a burst of revelation, but as a steady warmth, filtering into your dreams. The candle's flame shivers, one last time before it is gently pinched out, leaving the room in darkness. Yet the darkness does not feel empty. It is as if the afterglow of the study, the quiet weight of the sacred names and symbols, remains in the air like lingering incense. The Kabbalists teach that even in the deepest shadow, the light of Ein Sof is present, hidden, but unbroken. It is this belief that allows them to speak of exile, not only as a loss, but as an opportunity. For when the divine light is scattered, it becomes the task of humanity to seek it, to gather it, to lift it back toward its source. You picture them, walking narrow streets under a cold moon, their cloaks pulled close, their steps unhurried. Perhaps a passerby would see nothing unusual, only a group of quiet scholars heading home after the study of scripture. But inwardly, each one carries a vision of the tree, its roots, its branches, the flow of light from the infinite crown, down into the smallest details of life. All of it is alive in their thoughts, as they move through the world. To the Kabbalist, every action has weight. Lighting a lamp, greeting a stranger, speaking truth instead of silence, all are threads in the weave of the cosmos. The tree is not separate from the marketplace or the home. Its branches stretch into every human hour. Centuries later, the diagrams they drew and the words they guarded would spread beyond the walls of these hidden rooms. The language of the Sephira would pass through generations, carried into new lands by those who fled persecution. Spain, with its mingling of cultures and faiths, would give way to exile. But the tree of life is not bound by borders. It traveled with them, a map not of a place, but of reality itself. You imagine now that the tree is everywhere. Its roots sink into the earth beneath you. Its trunk rises unseen through the space around you. The branches above are filled with a soft, unending light. It does not demand anything from you. It simply exists, inviting you to notice the ways in which light can pass through your own life. 2. The mystics knew that the path to the crown, to Keter, was not a leap but a climb. One step, one act, one word at a time. Each Sephira was both a stage in the creation of the universe and a quality within the human heart. To study the tree was to study the self, and to repair the world was to begin with that self. Some nights, they would sit in silence together, letting the letters of the Hebrew alphabet pass slowly through the mind. Aleph, the silent letter, breath without sound, representing the unity before creation. Bet, the beginning, the house that contains the world. Each letter a gate, each sound a key. In their vision, the universe was not made once in the distant past, but is sustained in every moment by the same divine speech that brought it into being. And so, the letters were not relics, they were living, breathing streams of creation, moving through every corner of existence. The candlelight is gone now, but the tree remains. You feel it, not with the eyes, but with the sense that something ordered and luminous lies just beneath the surface of things. And as the night folds deeper, you sense that you are not only beneath its branches, you are part of them. The light of Ein Sof filters down, quiet and endless, touching even the smallest leaf, even the smallest breath. It does not vanish when your eyes close. It remains, as the mystics knew it always would, flowing silently through the tree of hidden light. Shinto, gateways to the spirit world. In the soft light of early morning, the mist hangs low over a quiet shoreline. From the haze, a shape emerges, a red torii gate rising from the water, its pillars reflected in the rippling tide. To step through such a gate is not to leave one place for another, but to cross an unseen boundary. In Shinto, the torii marks the passage from the realm of the human into the realm of the kami, the divine spirits that dwell in all things. Shinto is not a faith of rigid doctrines or sacred books. It is a way of life woven into the land itself, found in the spaces between seasons and in the acts of quiet care. A shrine does not demand grand rituals every day. Instead, it lives through the simple gestures of the people who tend it, the sweeping of leaves from a stone path, the washing of hands and mouth before approaching, the offering of a prayer carried by the wind. The kami are not distant deities in the sky. They are present in the rustle of leaves, in the rhythm of rain, in the form of mountains, rivers, and trees. Some kami are tied to particular places, a waterfall, an ancient cedar, a stretch of coastline, while others are linked to human ancestors or to forces like growth, harvest, and protection. To honor them is not to solve their mysteries, but to acknowledge them, bowing in respect for the life they share. You imagine walking along a narrow forest path toward a shrine. The air is cool, carrying the scent of earth and pine. Sunlight filters through the canopy, striking the moss-covered stones and patches of gold. Ahead, the bright red of a torii gate breaks the green of the trees. You stop, bow lightly, and pass beneath it, leaving behind the concerns of the ordinary world. Within the shrine grounds, the atmosphere changes. The sound of your footsteps seems louder on the gravel path. Somewhere, a wooden bell chimes as another visitor pulls the rope to announce their presence to the kami. At a nearby basin, you take the ladle in hand, pour water over your fingers, and bring a small sip to your lips. The act of purification. Temizu, clearing mind and body before prayer. Shimenawa ropes hang nearby, their thick, twisted strands of straw tied with white zigzag-shaped paper strips called sheed. These ropes mark a space as sacred, a place where the boundary between worlds is thin. You see them wrapped around the trunk of an immense tree, the bark weathered and strong, the roots gripping deep into the earth. For generations, this tree has been honored as the dwelling of a kami. It is not fenced away. It is greeted, touched with reverence, thanked for standing. At the heart of the shrine stands the hondan, the main hall where the spirit of the kami resides. You do not enter. Only priests may pass beyond its doors, but you stand before it in stillness. In your hands, a small coin feels warm. You toss it into the offering box, bow twice, clap twice to draw the kami's attention, then bow once more. The clapping is not applause, but signal, a sound that travels into the unseen nearby. Rows of small wooden plaques hang from a frame. These are Ima prayer boards, each carrying the written wishes of those who came before you. Some bear prayers for health, others for success, safe travel, or the well-being of loved ones. The wind moves through them, and the gentle clack of wood against wood feels like a conversation of hopes. Shinto shrines can be vast and famous, drawing pilgrims from across Japan, or they can be so small that they stand at the corner of a rice field or at the foot of a village path. What unites them is the care they receive. To neglect a shrine is to let the link between the human and the divine grow thin, but to tend it, even with the smallest act, is to affirm that the world around you is alive, and that life deserves gratitude. Season by season, these places transform. In spring, cherry blossoms frame the gates, petals drifting like soft rain over the stone steps. In summer, the air hums with cicadas, and lantern festivals fill the night with warm light. In autumn, maples turn to fire, the red of their leaves echoing the red of the torii, and in winter, snow lays a quiet veil over the grounds, the cold air sharpening every sound. Shinto is not only about the shrines themselves, it is also about the matsuri, the festivals that carry the kami from their sacred dwellings into the heart of the community. During these times, the boundary between the worlds is celebrated rather than merely crossed. Mikoshi portable. Shrines are lifted on the shoulders of chanting bearers, paraded through streets so that the blessings of the kami flow into every home. Yet even in the midst of festival joy, the heart of Shinto remains in the stillness. It is in the bow at the gate, the ladle of water in the hand, the silent exchange between person and tree, person and stone, person and wind. There is no need for elaborate explanations. The symbols here are not riddles to be solved. They are presences to be acknowledged. As you walk back toward the torii, the morning mist has begun to lift. Beyond the gate, the ordinary world waits, but something in it now feels different. Perhaps it is simply that you have seen how close the worlds truly are. The divine is not hidden away in unreachable realms. It moves quietly beside you, in the sway of branches, in the scent of rain, in the spaces where gratitude meets breath. You pause before stepping out, turning once more to bow lightly toward the shrine. The red pillars frame the view, holding the image in memory, a doorway between what is seen and what is felt. And then you pass beneath, carrying the stillness with you, the echo of clapping wood and the soft rustle of ropes, marking the places where the spirit world leans close to the human one. Jain monks, the white-clad pilgrims on the dry, sunlit roads of western India, a small group of figures move slowly along the edge of the dust. Their feet are bare, touching the warm earth with deliberate care. In one hand, each holds a soft broom of white threads, and with each step, they sweep the ground before them. The gesture is not symbolic. It is an act of vigilance, ensuring that no unseen insect, no crawling life, is harmed beneath their feet. These are the monks of Jainism, ascetics, who have renounced not only possessions, but the very possibility of causing harm. Their vow is ahimsa, non-violence in thought, word, and deed, a principle that is not merely taught, but lived in each moment. The order is divided between the Svetambara, the white-clad, and the Digambara, the ski-clad, who wear nothing at all, signifying complete detachment from the material world. Their robes, or the absence of them, are not for display. They are the outer reflection of an inner discipline, a life in which every thread, every action, is weighed against the cost it might carry for another living being. In the cool halls of Jain temples, the air is still, touched by the faint scent of sandalwood. The floors are polished marble, and light spills through latticed screens in patterns that move with the day. These temples are built not for grandeur, but for precision. Every carving, every curve of filigree, a work of devotion. On the walls and in the courtyards, the symbols of the faith are clear. The raised hand, palm open, with a small wheel in its center. The hand is the gesture to stop, to refrain from harm. The wheel is the Dharma chakra, the wheel of law, reminding all who see it that the soul moves toward liberation only when freed from the bonds of violence and desire. You imagine approaching one of these monks on the road. He does not look away, nor does he hurry to greet you. His pace remains steady, his gaze lowered, his breath calm. If you were to speak, he would answer softly, measuring his words so that they carry no harm, no falsehood. His life is pared down. 2 essentials, a simple bowl for food, a broom for the path, perhaps a few scriptures written on palm leaves. The vow of ahimsa reaches far beyond the avoidance of physical harm. It shapes thought itself. For the Jain monk, to think ill of another is a form of violence, just as real as striking them. Harsh speech, careless action, even the consumption of root vegetables that require killing the entire plant, all are avoided. In this way, the monk narrows his life, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the countless forms of life that move unseen around him. Their path is not easy. The Indian sun can be relentless, and the earth beneath their feet holds heat long after the day's peak. Yet the monks walk without complaint, for their journey is not toward a destination in this world. It is toward moksha, the release of the soul from the endless cycle of birth and death. In Jain belief, every soul is pure in its essence, luminous and unbounded. But through actions, attachments, and desires, the soul gathers karma, not as an abstract moral record, but as a kind of fine matter that clings to it, weighing it down into rebirth. To harm another being is to bind oneself further. To live harmlessly is to loosen the bonds. You think of how different such a life would be from your own. Each gesture slowed, each choice tested against a vow. The patience required is not sudden. It is cultivated over years, often beginning in youth. Before becoming monks, many lived as lay followers, practicing the smaller vows of ahimsa, truth, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-attachment. Only when ready do they take the greater vows, leaving behind home, family, and all possessions. The initiation is marked by a ritual of humility, the kesh luncheon, in which the candidate's hair is plucked out by hand, symbolizing the letting go of vanity and comfort. From that day forward, they live entirely on alms, eating only what is offered, never asking for specific foods, never preparing meals that might involve harm to living things in the Jain libraries. Scriptures preserved for centuries speak of the Tirthankaras, the Fordmekras, spiritual teachers who have crossed the river of rebirth and shown the path to others. Mahavira, the last of the 24 Tirthankaras, lived in the 6th century BCE, a contemporary of the Buddha. He taught that liberation is possible only through complete self-discipline and the eradication of harm in every form. His life, too, was marked by long wanderings, bare feet on dusty roads, carrying the same broom and bowl as the monks who follow him today. The temples dedicated to the Tirthankaras rise like pale mountains in the sun. Mount Shatranjaya in Gujarat holds hundreds of them, their marble steps climbing steeply into the sky. Pilgrims ascend in silence, their eyes tracing the delicate carvings of lotus flowers, elephants, and celestial beings, all cut from white stone. The quiet there is deep, broken only by the shuffle of feet and the soft ring of a bell calling the mind back to devotion. Even the monk's silence is active. It is not the absence of speech, but the presence of awareness of how each sound, each movement, touches the world. When they do speak, it is with the aim of clarity, often using the ancient language of Ardhamagati, the tongue in which Mahavira's teachings were first recorded. You imagine standing at the edge of such a gathering, watching as a group of monks passes their robes, stir in the dry wind, the white cloth holding a faint gleam against the brown earth. The broom moves ahead of each step. The eyes remain lowered, not from shame, but from a refusal to claim more of the world than is needed. In the presence of such discipline, Your own breath begins to slow. The noise of thought eases, replaced by the awareness of the ground beneath you, the air moving in and out of your lungs. You think of the raised hand of the Jain symbol, the wheel within it, and how its meaning is less a command than an invitation. Stop and see the life that is here. Their journey is endless in appearance, yet precise in purpose. For each step, each sweep of the broom, each word spoken or withheld, moves them toward the lightness of a soul freed from harm. They do not walk to arrive anywhere, but to live in the way that brings them closest to liberation. The day deepens toward evening. Shadows lengthen on the path, and the monks continue without pause, their forms small against the wide sky. The dust rises briefly beneath their feet, then settles again, undisturbed by harm, and somewhere in that steady rhythm, footfall, sweep, breath, the vow of ahimsa, becomes not only a discipline for monks on the road, but a quiet reminder too. Anywho, watch, that the weight of harm can be set down, and the world can be walked more gently. The sand Bushmen, dancers of the trance, hunting the wide expanse of the Kalahari. The earth is dry and pale, and the stars hang in such clear darkness that they seem close enough to touch. This land has been home to the San, one of the oldest, continuous cultures on earth, for tens of thousands of years. They live in close rhythm with the land, reading the faintest tracks in the dust, listening to the calls of distant birds, and knowing the places where water hides beneath the sand. At night, when the heat begins to fade and the sky deepens into its endless black, a fire is lit in the center of the camp. Sparks rise like fleeting stars, and the people gather. Some sit, some stand, and some begin to move to a rhythm that has no beginning and no end. This is the trance dance, a sacred act, a healing act, an act as old as memory itself. The San believe that within every person is a life force, a spiritual energy they call En. During the dance, this energy can be awakened, rising like heat within the body. It begins in the stomach and moves upward into the chest, the head, and beyond. As it grows stronger, the healer enters a state the San call Kia, a deep trance, where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual begins to dissolve. The dancers move in a circle, their feet pressing into the sand with a steady beat. The rhythm is carried by the clicking sounds of their language, woven into song, and the clapping of hands around the fire. The flames cast long shadows that shift and sway on the ground, making the dancers seem both human and something other beings moving between worlds. As the trance deepens, the healer's breath changes. Their eyes may close, or open wide and unfocused. In this state, they say they can see sickness, as if it were smoke rising from the body. They reach into the invisible realm, pulling the sickness out and sending it away. It is not just a physical cure they seek, but a balancing of the spirit, a restoration of harmony between the person, the community, and the living land around them. The San speak in quiet tones, telling stories of those who have danced before. They remember the ancestors, the great hunters, and the first healers, who also called upon the En, in times of need. In this way, the dance is not just for the living. It is a bridge to those who came before, to the spirits who still walk the dry grass and sleep in the shadow of the thorn trees. Their rock art, painted in red ochre on stone walls, captures fragments of this world. Some figures are half human, half animal, symbols of the merging of hunter and hunted, body and spirit. Others have arms raised or bent in the shapes seen during trance. For the San, these images are not decorations. They are records of journeys taken in the spirit realm, reminders that the world they see by daylight is only part of a greater whole. The clicking rhythm of the dance carries on for hours. The air grows thick with heat from the fire, and the smell of wood smoke clings to the dancer's skin. Even when exhaustion sets in, the circle keeps moving. There is no fixed moment when the trance begins or ends. It rises slowly, like the coming of dawn, and fades just as gradually. The San know that the land is alive in every sense, not just the animals and plants, but the wind, the stones, and the water hidden deep below. All of it has a spirit, and all of it can listen. In trance, the healers can speak to these presences, asking for guidance, for protection, for the strength to endure in a place where survival is always earned. Sometimes, when the in-am grows too strong, the healer may shake, cry out, or collapse to the ground. This is not a sign of weakness, but of the energy reaching its peak. In this moment, they are said to be walking the threads between worlds, seeing both the living and the unseen. When they return, they bring back what they have learned, sometimes a cure, sometimes a warning, sometimes a message that cannot be explained in words. As the night deepens, the songs begin to soften, the clapping slows, and the dancers' steps become lighter, almost like drifting. The fire burns lower, glowing in deep embers. The wind moves through the dry grass in soft waves, and even the insects seem too quiet. For the San, this is not the end of the dance, but part of its cycle. The energy settles, the endam cools, and the people rest. The sicknesses and troubles they carried into the circle feel lighter now, as if some unseen weight has been lifted. In the silence that follows, the Kalahari feels vast and eternal. The stars above look down on the same earth where these dances have been held for countless generations. No written scripture is needed here. The land itself is the sacred text, and the dance is how it is read. And in that stillness, you sense that the earth is listening back, holding every step, every breath, every beat of the trance in a memory, far older than your own. The embers pulse gently, their glow mirrored in the eyes of those still gathered. Some lie back on the sand, gazing upward, their bodies cooling after hours of movement. Others sit close to the fire, heads bowed in quiet reflection. The night feels different now, not simply darker, but fuller, as though something unseen has joined the circle and settled among them. For the San, this feeling is as real as the fire's warmth. They say that during trance, the barriers between people grow thin. What one person feels can be shared by another. A mother may sense the relief in her child's body after healing. A hunter may feel the calm of an elder's blessing. In the deep flow of the dance, each heartbeat blends into the rhythm of the group. And for a time, there is no I or you, only we. The trance dance is never only about the healer's journey. The singing, the clapping, the slow stepping in a ring, all of it feeds the end. Without the community, the healer cannot travel far. Without the healer, the community cannot shed what troubles them. This exchange is the foundation of their survival, as important as water, food, or shelter. Beyond the firelight, the Kalahari stretches endlessly. In the distance, a jackal's call echoes against the emptiness. Somewhere, under the sand, the roots of a camelthorn tree are drawing from a hidden water vein, as they have for centuries. These same roots, twisted and strong, may one day be gathered for fuel, feeding another fire, starting another dance. The San see no clear boundary between the act of hunting and the act of healing. Both require focus, endurance, and the ability to move between worlds. In the trance, A healer may see visions of animals, the springbok, the kudu, the eland, not as prey but as guides. The eland, in particular, is central to their spiritual life. Its power is said to be great in healing, and its image appears often in their rock art, painted with care and reverence. The clicking language continues to weave through the air, even as the songs slow. It is one of the oldest living tongues, carrying echoes of an ancient human past. Each sound is precise, each tone layered with meaning. To listen to it under the stars, in the company of fire and sand, is to hear not just words, but the memory of humanity itself. Some say the dance began in the time before stories, before the first lines were drawn on stone. Others say it was given to the sand by the spirits of the land, so that people would never forget how to see the world with more than their eyes. Whether the first dance was held 1,000 years ago, or 10,000, no one can say. What is certain is that, tonight, it still moves with the same pulse. When the last embers finally fade, the circle opens. The dancers return to their shelters, stepping carefully in the cool sand. The healer, now resting, may sleep heavily, their dreams carrying traces of the journey just taken. The air is still. The constellations above are the same ones that have guided travelers and hunters for ages, and will continue to do so long after these footprints vanish from the sand. The Kalahari holds its silence again, but the rhythm of the dance remains, like a heartbeat deep in the earth. You cannot hear it with your ears now, but it lingers in the ground, in the stars, in the air that moves across the grass. It waits for the next gathering, the next fire, the next night, when footsteps and song will open the path once more. Mystics of Mount Athos, far from the rush of the mainland, the sea around the Athenite peninsula moves with a slow, steady breath. The waters deepen to a rich blue, and above them, Mount Athos rises, a spine of forested slopes, crowned with stone monasteries that seem almost to grow from the rock itself. For over 1,000 years, this place has been a refuge for those who seek stillness, a living sanctuary where time bends and the modern world drifts far away. Here, the rhythm of life is measured not by clocks, but by prayer. At dawn, the monks rise to the sound of a wooden sementron, a plank struck in slow, deliberate beats, calling them to the first service of the day. The air is cool, tinged with salt from the Aegean. Candles are lit in the darkness, their flames reflected in the polished brass of hanging lamps in the stone courtyards. The scent of beeswax mingles with the sharper tang of incense. Icons watch from the walls, not mere images, but, to the monks, open windows through which heaven leans close. Each one has been painted with prayerful precision, layered with gold leaf and color, blessed with quiet hands. When a monk bows before them, he is not simply honoring the saints, he is meeting them, face to face. Across the veil of time, at the heart of Athenite spirituality, lies the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Spoken slowly, or whispered, or held silently in the mind, it is repeated again and again, until the words no longer need to be formed by the lips. They move into the breath, into the heartbeat, until the prayer speaks itself without effort. The fathers here say that when this happens, the soul begins to breathe in harmony with God. The monasteries are built for endurance. Thick stone walls rise above the sea cliffs, their arched windows looking out toward miles of open water. Narrow passageways wind between chapels and gardens, where olives, figs, and vines grow in terraced plots. The silence here is not empty. It is layered, like the patina on an icon, with centuries of whispered psalms and the quiet work of devotion. Inside the Catholicon, the main church of each monastery, the light falls in narrow beams through small, high windows. Dust motes drift in the air, each one touched by gold from the icons. The chants of the monks rise slowly, filling the space with a deep, resonant sound that seems to have no single source. In this acoustics of stone, the human voice becomes something larger, something that feels as though it has always been present. For those who come here from the outside world, the first days can be disorienting. There is no rush, no background hum of machines, no glow of screens. Meals are eaten in silence while a single monk reads aloud from the lives of the saints. Sleep comes early, often before the night is deep, because the next service will begin before the sun rises. The mind resists at first, reaching for noise and distraction, but gradually, under the steady weight of quiet, it softens. In the gardens, the sea wind stirs the leaves of cypress and olive. The monks work without hurry, pruning vines, repairing walls, drawing water from the wells. Every action is a form of prayer, an offering of the hands in service. They say that tending a plant here is not simply an act of cultivation, but a way to remember Eden, to live as if the world is still, capable of harmony. The hermitages farther up the mountain are even more remote. A narrow path winds past low stone huts, some clinging to the cliffside, their doors opening onto views that fall away into blue water. Here, solitary monks keep their own rhythm, their days divided between work, scripture, and the unbroken repetition of the Jesus prayer. Visitors rarely come this far, and the silence is so complete that even the movement of the tide seems loud. The spiritual aim of Athonite life is not escape from the world, but transformation within it. Every rope marking a sacred tree, they are no longer separate from the way you hold the moments of your life. The world's faiths are not merely voices in the distance. They are notes in the same breath you take now. They move through you, quietly, like the wind that passes through every forest, touching leaf, stone, and stream without belonging to any one of them. You close your eyes, and it is as though a temple has formed around you, not built of stone, but of stillness. The walls are your calm, the roof is your patience, and the flame at the center is simply the life you carry. It asks for nothing elaborate, no chant, no offering, only the soft act of noticing it is there. The night folds itself around you, as it has folded around countless others before, pilgrims, dancers, scribes, and seekers, each carrying their own quiet light into the dark. And so you rest, the silent flame still within you, steady as breath, endless as the turning of the world. The flame does not hurry. It does not strain to grow higher, nor does it shrink when the winds of thought pass by. It simply stays warm enough to be felt, soft enough not to disturb the darkness. In this way, it teaches you how to rest. There is no need to hold the day in your hands any longer. The conversations, the unfinished tasks, the small worries, they can be set down beside you now, like stones taken from your pocket at the end of a long walk. Feel how light you become without them. The body softens, the breath finds its own rhythm, and the mind, no longer asked to solve or carry, begins to sway gently toward stillness. You are safe here. The night is not an empty space to be crossed, but a shelter, a place where the world itself exhales, and where you are invited to do the same. Each inhale draws in calm. Each exhale releases what you no longer need. It is a slow, unforced letting go, like a tide returning to the sea. Thoughts may still move in the distance, but they grow quieter, as if stepping further into the shadows. And you, here by the silent flame, remain untouched by their passing. This is the temple you carry into sleep, a place with no walls to keep you in, and no doors to keep peace out. It travels with you into dreams, and waits for you when you wake again. Now, there is only the warmth, the steady glow, and the comfort of knowing you do not need to do anything more tonight. The flame will keep watch. You may close your eyes, you may drift, and the world will turn, as it always has, bringing you gently into tomorrow.